this first one he's cussing in. I believe this first. There may be adult language. Warning.
There's going to be a little bit of cussing in some of these videos. That's.
Nope.
Oh shit.
Yeah.
We're doing these? Oh.
Yeah. Yeah. There's some good ones in here. I don't think I'd seen many, if any, of these.
Public service, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to go ahead and begin our show tonight by making sure to remind you to stop and look both ways when you cross the tracks. Oh.
She almost got hit by that tractor.
Dang it.
There's a couple pretty substantial ones in here.
I better go. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness.
Oh my goodness.
If you look, his landing gear hit the pad.
Oh my god.
So he got beached, basically.
Oh, he's stuck.
Yeah, his landing gear stuck him.
Pendleton, oh my goodness. Oh my.
Just tractor delete. It leaves the trailer sitting there.
I mean, at least the cargo's okay.
I mean, the guy got out, but it just deletes the tractor, and you can hear the container banging off the ladders on the train cars. He almost got stopped.
Oh no. And
Yeah.
then, Jeff, are you doing a little tweeting, Zach and Jeff? Are you guys pushing this out a little bit?
Yeah.
Oh my.
The kids are so excited to hit a school
Kid
bus.
yells, "Holy crap."
It's hard to tell what happened there. I don't know if it derailed or... Now, some of these are just people running the stop arms. This guy runs the stop arm.
Thinking they're special.
Well, I think he kind of got caught in it, in his defense, but this one just explodes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, just
He
explodes.
doesn't even slow down. He's just like, go.
Well, the truth is they really can't slow down.
No, it takes a mile to slow down, man. Oh,
I had my brother-in-law's dad drove trains for a living, and he said they've usually called 911 before they even hit you. They put the brakes on full, and they call 911, and then they hit you. Apparently, it can be very depressing for the train driver, too, even though there's nothing they could have done.
Of course it is. Yes, I've heard that many times.
Although, man, I'm sorry. I mean, it's kind of a distasteful joke, but, trains are on the tracks. Trains don't come through your neighborhood and hit your car. I mean, the thing you can't do is stop on the tracks. I mean, you can't blame a train for running down the tracks. I mean, you have to yield to the train.
If you ever thought you could drive through one of those, you just found out right there.
This one, I was like, what's it going to show us? You'll see it here at the end. They're like mid-derailment.
Right now? Oh, no.
Yeah, the back of the train's derailing. So, bad camera work. But then, there goes a car by itself.
Oh,
these cars are on the ground.
Concrete trucks and trains. Oh, man.
There's a little carbon for you. That's our next topic. You see the roll coal out of the exhaust pipe?
Well, I don't know. There is that whole train life. We do have a whole thing going on.
Watch how lucky this guy.
Nate?
Watch how lucky this guy gets.
Good. Oh my God.
Just deletes the trailer. He's still driving. He may not even know he got hit. I don't know.
Passenger car.
Ever lose a FedEx package? Just. That would have to be very disorienting to be sitting there and all of a sudden.
I hope everyone, after they watch America Heals, drives just a little slower and a little more careful.
Yeah. It's just abject failure. Just abject failure. That's a crane. A few years ago, a backhoe was hit and caused a derailment. They think it was intentional here in Kansas, just out in the middle of nowhere. Someone put a tractor on the rails.
Wow. What's going on, Nate? What's going on, Birdman? That sucks.
That car goes for a ride. And for those of you that don't live out in the middle of nowhere, when you get in these rural train crossings, the trains are moving.
So, Jeff, I come from a little itty bitty burg in the middle of nowhere in Iowa, and there is one train track. I mean, there's 30 people in the town.
I think
there's
the
a
driver
train track that's killed.
There's somebody in this car when it gets hit.
It's insane.
I think the driver was working against them. I don't think the driver got it in neutral.
There are those little places in the.
This is pretty cool. Like, I thought this part of the video was pretty cute, actually. They like scraped this whatever putty off to say like and subscribe. I thought that was pretty cute.
That's cool.
Okay, here.
The cow is like, dude.
This cow is like, go around.
I don't want to move.
Yeah, I was really hoping I wasn't going to see a cow get hit by a train.
Cow
And we
catcher.
did. And we didn't. This looks like the safety video from high school. I remember this video. And man, that bus is just deleted.
Gets the license plate. Check
Nice.
it out.
I'm not waiting for the train. Oh my god.
This one.
Jeez. That guy did a pretty good job breaking that thing. That was impressive.
Most
Not
worthless
very good
shortcut ever. Why would you be shortcutting down the railroad tracks? I like this old guy just like sauntering away.
He's just walking through
I'm
this.
just gonna go ahead and move. That's a near miss.
With a logging truck or train.
Yeah.
It's so much weight coming through there.
Just
I guess
drives
glad
off.
to fix that light that just went flying. Pare.
Yes.
Looks like a
You know, this reminds me
out.
as we go through that. This reminds me of
Watch this one. I know the pictures are there for whatever. This is the last one. So someone was just apparently going to watch this train go by and wait till the last second. You're not going to believe it.
Jeez.
It's just full speed collision of a car and a train. Woo. All right.
Wow.
That was my shtick for tonight.
Wow. All right. That's what a way to start. But you know what it's like? It's sort of like watching a juggernaut. It's watching the power politics of something that's coming. And this week is a big week. Who are we talking to over here? These guys are talking about the app. Very cool. America Real, America Heals, and it let me. Really?
Interesting.
Really? That's awesome. Elena is on Periscope like old times.
Well, it's always weird too, because
Are
like
you
if
on
I
a
go,
phone or are you on a computer browser? That's my question. Did
I'm
she
in
say
with-
that, didn't she?
I'm in with her, but I came in through Twitter, and you'll see it has my Periscope name.
Wait.
So-
You still have the Periscope app on your phone?
I do, but I clicked on the Twitter live.
Okay. Elena's using the phone Periscope app. I heard that they were going to try to rebuild something.
it has all the old buttons like theater mode, give super hearts, only available in Periscope. Like it looks like Periscope, but I came in through Twitter.
Well, hell yeah.
1 second, I have my son here to ask me a question.
I don't even know where my phone is. That's something I just figured out.
Okay,
Yeah, that wall is still up there for me.
Yeah, I don't know. Open the
Say
Periscope.
what? You're what? You're the wall?
Yeah, the wall on the Periscope app that stops you from getting past the opening screen.
Okay.
Oh, well, mine. Now, this is interesting. My Periscope app, it says at the top, will be discontinuing March whatever. But look, there we are. So now I just went in through the Periscope app. So I can do it either way. This is so weird.
Heck yeah.
Well, maybe it seemed to me, let's be honest, Twitter Live has been an abject failure. You cannot use Twitter. I cannot use Twitter Live. If I try and go live on Twitter Live, just straight in through the app, it does not work. It's live for 7 seconds. People come and go. They can't see me. They can't hear me. It's an abject failure. So maybe they're regrouping and figuring like we thought. To me, what I don't get is why they wouldn't just rename the Periscope app Twitter Live, and let you broadcast back and forth or not or whatever. But maybe it seems they're regrouping because it seems that the Twitter Live launch has been horrible, and Twitter Live went live like 3 years ago or something, and I guess it's never worked.
Okay, well, let's do this little conversation because we've been needing to do it.
Yeah.
I want to hear from Elena and from Nate if he's on here, and Zach, you're on here. I need you to kind of teach me some shit, and Jeff, you too. Let's talk about Twitch. Why has Twitch never been part of the mix? Or maybe that's not the right question. Twitch.
I would say Twitch is mainly used by video game streamers. That's its primary focus. So if you're not a video game streamer, it's not your main conduit.
That's the main users, but the point would be, our group of friends could all go in there and do lives, I believe. I guess the one thing, I don't think there's a way to do any kind of guest without using a third-party app. So, like, for example, I've been doing my haps and broadcasting to Twitter. I actually got one follower one night. I got my viewership report, and it was like all zeros. It was hilarious because I put like 4 or 5 out there, but like no one's watching. It seems that Twitch is a little harder to surf. It seems like Twitch is a bit more like a Discord or whatever, where you have to kind of know somebody's there. It doesn't feel as much like the thing I like most about Periscope is the ability to channel surf, to go down a feed, see who's live, pick the one you want, or search for a topic or whatever. And
without having to have a magnifying glass on your phone to see the text. Because, honestly, man, I can't read it. It's so small half the time. It's really...
On what, Twitch? Or
on the haps. As you go down and you look on your phone, I can see it, obviously, but I can't really find people. I know that there are people who see each other's faces and they can recognize each other. It's too small on my phone. I
use Haps almost entirely on my laptop. I've created this desk space, and I use Haps almost entirely on my laptop. It also is much easier to report broadcasts if you're on a laptop because you can copy the link for the video and all that, which I don't know exactly how you even do that on a phone. So Haps, in my mind, is really a laptop-based thing. The phone app has been kind of an afterthought, although it seems to be getting better every day. We all need to remember, too, Haps is calling itself publicly beta. They're not saying they're done. And if you listen to their daily meetings, they are changing things daily. So, I think it has potential. It seems that they are moderating, which is good. We were all worried about their moderation there for a while. They are moderating. They are cracking down on fake news and bullying. So I think that's a good thing. So it has potential, but yeah, why we weren't all already on Twitch, I don't really have a great answer because it does do the things we want it to do, but
and through StreamYard, I need to get this over there. I just need to get my shit together and put it through because we can put this on Twitch through StreamYard. So
I had a Twitch because people I liked were on Twitch, so I got an account. So I was like, I might as well broadcast there. It doesn't cost me anything to push it out there. But as I say, I've gotten like one hit one night because I don't think it has the surfing ability that Periscope did. I think Haps you can definitely surf, and I've noticed that they've dropped some of the people they're moderating off the trending list. So that seems to be good. And I found a few interesting people a few times now on Haps, and I'm actually surprised how much on Haps, and I'm sure it's everywhere. People get on and just talk about nothing. It's like, I know we talk about politics mostly, but even when I'm not talking about politics, I'm telling a story, I'm discussing some situation. I mean, there's people that just sit on Haps and like watch TV, broadcasting themselves watching TV or what. It's just like, I don't understand what you're doing, dude. But I'm sure we had all that on Periscope too. It's just, we liked the people we liked and didn't just surf through all the randoms, which is basically what we're now doing on Haps, is surfing through the randoms. But it is fun. I found Euromaestro was on the other night from an Airbnb. And a bunch of people I'd followed from him were in there on Haps. So I was able to follow people that I had before. And, we're kind of all rebuilding, I guess. The good news is we all have sort of our Twitter backbone for most of us that were close. So we can all, as we find new homes, we can join. But I'm most impressed with Haps that they are actually moderating, because, it's easy to put out rules and say, we don't want bullying, we don't want fake news, blah, 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 blah. But then when you have a group of, say, 150 people that come in and they're having broadcasts, they're being robust, but then they're breaking your conditions, your terms. A lot of places yield under that and just sort of say, well, we want the viewership, we want the users, and so they start to back off on their policies. And to Haps' credit, they don't seem to be doing that. So that makes me very happy. And I know they had an Olympic announcer they were planning on using that had a tirade, and they dropped him. So they seem to have some ethics, which is good. I think maybe the president being on Twitter for 4 years has taught some social media people, you can't just sit on the sidelines. Like, you're either part of it or you're against it.
So I think that's incredibly important. And it sounds like Twitch, is not really something that a lot of people that have been in our political discussions have been part of. I want to move the ball a little bit, just speedy here, and recognize that we're going to keep chugging along with what we're doing. We got a couple of viewers right now on our YouTube channel. We've got a few viewers on our Twitter Live. And the beauty of this show is that people also watch it afterwards. In fact, we've got almost as many folks that watch it later on. And I think that that's part of the beauty of the Twitter media, in that this can sit there with people who get to it when they can and have a chance to take it seriously in a way that they might not currently be able to do in a live stream mode. So tonight's idea is that we're going to get into talking about some foreign policy. Zach is going to take us through some things. I'm going to take us through some things. The first thing I want to just sort of shift gears on is the concept of the power politics of carbon. Sorry, let me pull it back. Carbon politics as power politics. Maybe that's the right way to say it. It seems like it's far away. It seems like it's geeky. It seems like it's maybe obscure and futuristic. But the fact is that the days of that are here. People who are serious people in industry are thinking about the year 2030 right now. They're already looking 5-7 years ahead, because that's what you do in industry. You're planning that far ahead because it takes that much investment and time to be there when it's time. And so we are now seeing some amazing technological breakthroughs in the breakdown of trying to capture carbon and put it into the earth, put it into wetlands, changing agriculture policy, different things like that. Let's start there. I'm going to leave it there and just drop that in there of the idea of carbon politics, and then we'll go from there. We'll get into the foreign policy stuff with it, because the environmental politics are going to go along with it. But Zach, as a budding Politico, right? You're young, you're new to voting. How much of your bandwidth, of your voter bandwidth, if you had 100% meter, how much of your voter bandwidth would be dealing with carbon politics?
I guess I should disclose I'm a member of the Sunrise Movement, which is one of the more prominent environmental activist groups on the left. So if that gives you a clue of where I stand, I think I'm not sure if I can give it a percentage, but I would say it's my number one issue for sure. My number one issue.
Your number one issue.
Wow.
If a politician is bad on environmental politics, I would not vote for them. Like it is a deal breaker for me.
And Jeff, you just said, wow, let's go there. This is what we're exploring.
It's tough. I mean, I obviously acknowledge Zach's brilliance in the political realm. whenever someone says, my number one issue, for example, being environmental care, I mean, I guess I'd have to be, for me, I guess my number one issue is, for example, being pro-choice. So you could be a great environmentalist and be pro-life, and I can't vote for you. So I guess it just matters what each of us feel. And then, of course, when we're talking about fascism and all these other issues, I mean, I guess just to call out number one, I guess I'm sure Zach would put a caveat on within the realm of reason. I mean, they need to be a Democrat too, and they need to be, not a social pariah, and they need to be pro-environment. So I mean, with a few caveats, I don't think I'd put environmentalism that high. I don't think I'd put carbon that high on my list, but I can respect that Zach does.
Yeah, I mean, the reason why I put it so high up is
there we go.
the reason why I put it so high up is because it affects almost everything else, right? I mean, if you look at the environment, that affects immigration, as Birdman's talking down below. The reason why we're seeing these mass spikes in immigration is because the Central American countries are becoming unstable due to crop failures and instability caused by climate change. Not only that, it's going to fuck with our military. I don't want our military to be screwed over. Think about how many bases we have around the world, especially our naval bases, that are at risk of flooding, at risk of damages because of the rising sea levels. I don't want American military forces to be impaired in any way. I want us to be as safe as possible, right? So there's another reason. I'm heavily against the forever wars, and we'll get more into that later in the show. But if you think oil has nothing to do with the forever wars and our politics in the Middle East, then you're wrong. Oil is a major factor in our decisions in the Middle East. So that's another aspect of it all. So I think it really impacts so many different things in our environment. And I think, as Marty might get into later, agriculture, fishing, like our entire way of life, it's all around environmental policy. Like, at its root, everything can be connected to it. So that's why I think, for me, it's the number one policy.
Those are all sound
So
points.
let's dig deeper into this in the concept of carbon policy, because I think we jumped into it of environmental policy, but Zach, carbon policy is where we get right into names like Mnuchin and Toomey and whatever Pennsylvania senators there are, and whatever coal country senators that there are, who are dealing with an economy that cannot accept the fact that the reason that I asked what your opinion was, and you gave it to me without anything, and we then bantered about, and that's all great. What we speculated you believed. What really mattered is your first reaction. And your first reaction is, this is the biggest thing that you face as a young political mind. And so going back to that place, your priorities are looking at an entire plate of political options that are so different from people who are trying to hold on to the carbon lifestyle.
Yeah. And I definitely disagree with those people. Yeah.
That's an important thing to recognize as we even address these issues, that we're coming at it. For some, it's sort of like a heritage thing. This is who I am. This is where I'm from. This is my family. You're attacking me with these ideas. And so we're now just getting to a place where we've got enough minds and enough science around it to recognize that, oh my God, the carbon thing is bigger than their anxiety. We're going to have to make that political exchange to say, sorry, we can't wait around anymore. These things have happened in our politics before. We've decided to take lead out of our daily lives. Lead was a very easy thing for a lot of industries to use. It was like plastic before plastic. You could stretch damn near anything with lead and it would make it better, paint or whatever. So I lift this up to kick it off and saying, look at your perspective, and any thoughts about that before we go on, because it's going to affect how we address the foreign policy stuff too.
Jeff or me, or
either one, I don't care.
I think one thing I'd like to say
talking epistemology here again, right?
I think, yeah, right. I think, and I've said it before, I'll say it again. I think one thing, if we have a focus of reducing carbon, we can make decisions progressively through time to help us reduce our carbon footprint versus, I think when the right hears us talk about carbon, they expect us to want to get rid of our cars tomorrow and make them get rid of their cars tomorrow and all these other really aggressive steps where, I feel very strongly we should be talking about, how do we basically moderate our behavior to head in the right direction without having to do those, huge, massive changes. You know what I mean? So I guess I'm just trying to say if you do an incremental change, if you have a goal of reducing carbon, you can make all those decisions as you go. Like you were talking about some new technologies, Marty.
Mhm.
You can just each thing you do every day, you just start trying to head away from carbon. It doesn't have to be an immediate thing if we all start working soon versus wait until things are really, really, like Zach is saying, if you wait until you have a base underwater, you're not going to be able to reverse at that point. You're already going to be, you know what I mean? I like the idea of keeping carbon as one of our goals all the time, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Versus,
Keeping it as a goal. I'm going to put that down.
Yeah.
That's where and I like that language because I think it's indicative of where you're coming from. So I'm going to put that down as a goal.
Yes.
Zach, is it a goal for you or is it something else?
It's an existential crisis. So,
please.
Higher ranking he has it.
That's why this is critical.
which is fair. Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to say he's wrong.
And we don't have anybody on this panel that says the enemy, because there are some who would say this whole conversation is bullshit,
Right.
made up.
Right. My QAnon buddy was also in the oil industry, by the way. Isn't that interesting? So yeah, he was very much, this is all fracking doesn't cause earthquakes, pipelines are safe, just on and on and on and on.
And the reason that I'm pushing on this a little bit is because I'm pushing on Zach a little bit because he's the bulwark here. He's the one who isn't going to move on this because he's new, and this is his honest place, and I'm using it. So thank you, Zach. Big difference. Zach learned. I'm going to just tell me when I'm done where I'm wrong. You learned in science class. You learned in movies. You learned in conversations that you had in your recent last 10 years of life that this is something that, holy shit, I'm going to have to deal with the rest of my days. If I want to have a family, if I want to have a long life, these are the things I'm going to be dealing with. For you, there is a $0 sales budget in marketing to make sure Zach knows this is a big deal. Zach's walking around with this shit on the top of his head.
Right.
For a Gen Xer like you and me, there has to be a pretty large sales budget for us to really give a shit about this. And for people that are even older, there's a much higher sales budget that you have to get them to care. And the truth is that if this remains a goal, this remains something that is altruistic at its root, that we'll just do it because it's the right thing. The fact is that we have to, I believe, economically, we have to make it an economic incentive to move this direction.
Yeah, definitely.
Which means we have to get past this political discussion into, I don't know, whatever I'm trying to say, into a different realm, into a different level of conversation where we recognize a new demographic, where we're looking at people. We can look at a demographic right now in the toxicity of our recent politic and say, oh my God, 13% of them were QAnon, or 44% of them were QAnon, and that matters. Zach's political standing, it needs to be something that we start to look at. We need to say, these are, what am I trying to say? These are convinced green votes.
Yeah.
Zero sales necessary. They are all going to vote because they're scared shitless because they're going to have to deal with this for the next 50 years. And if we could stop the carbon craziness sooner, the effects on the rest of their experience on this planet will be a lot better.
right.
We aren't talking about that number in our politics. There's none of our media that are reporting on that number. And I think it's a large number. I think a lot of people your age.
We just got done with the president who said, global warming was a hoax. So we have a lot of ground to cover.
I'm just, but this is where it's at. Zach,
a lot of ground.
I think a good way to phrase this whole conversation is, you guys are more of the generation of, we need to think about our children's future. I'm of the generation, I need to think about my future. Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So I think that,
I'm also in the generation of shit. I've got 15 years left of being an executive in institutions while we watch the end of civilization if we don't get this shit right. That's the other piece. I'm coming into the rosy years of my administrative life where I'm like, this is just going to be catastrophe after catastrophe. Right. So it's not just about my kids. It's about I'm where I wanted to be right now. And now all of a sudden we're talking about, sea levels rising.
Yeah.
Right.
And potentially massive, movement around North America.
Yeah. I mean, and I think we can talk about the science and the need to market this, but if you're living in California right now, you have seen the fire season change from something that, you would hear about it, you would hear, oh, there's another fire, to now, for most of the West Coast, you have an entire like month, September. September is the month where you can't go outside or you need an N95 mask.
Yep.
The orange sky that happened in California last September, I think, that got really famous. That got a lot of clout. What didn't get a lot of attention is the 2 weeks prior and the 2 weeks after, where there was gray haze and people couldn't go outside. And that's becoming a fixture in the California weather cycle. I don't want to have to live with that.
And it's because of that. We had it in Colorado as well. We've been having it every year. And I had it when I was in California as well. It's like being in Duluth, Minnesota in February. You can't go outside for a whole month. There's nothing to do outside. You can't go wash your car. Like you go outside and your throat hurts.
Yeah.
No, this is like recent stuff too. It's
I think some of it's, I could be wrong, but isn't some of it also infrastructure issues like power company transformers exploding and I assume power lines falling and things like that cause some of these fires? You also have a situation, I know it happened in the Rocky Mountain National Forest, you take an area, you start controlling it, and not to make Donald Trump's point for him because he's an idiot, but you do end up in a situation where you have all, because there's no small pocketed fires periodically from lightning strikes or whatever, because all those are actively controlled, you do end up in a situation where your forest floor is covered in downed trees and pine needles 2 feet thick and things like that. And then when it does go, it's apocalyptic because it has all this fuel where, say, in the pioneer days, a lightning strike would cause a hillside to burn, and that would just be the way it was. When a hillside burnt, and over time it regenerates. But that was a way to keep them. These fires are so explosive because of all the downed trees and all the pine needles, because we don't have that natural fire cycle. So when you do get something abnormally hot,
it's so much drier though. These summers are so much drier than they have been,
But I think as we settle into these areas and stuff too, I could be wrong, but we don't have controlled forest burns anywhere in California, do we? The only way they burn is when it gets out of control, right?
So in 1907, I believe it was 1907, I could be slightly off on the date, but I believe the California state legislature made it illegal for controlled fires because that was a Native American practice that they did to help maintain the land, because they understood that if you have controlled small regular fires, you wouldn't have the big one. And so California made that illegal in 1907. Now, the big thing here, though, is we haven't gotten these massive fires in a century. So there still is that,
I think there's a lot of things. And don't get me wrong, I'm sure environmental is key. But I would wager there's probably some infrastructure problems. I know at least one of them was started by a power company transformer exploding, right, or a line going down. So you probably got an overtaxed infrastructure that was built, 40 years ago for half the users that were probably overusing, and of course the power company is not going to just not hook up more people, right? They're going to collect that money. So I think there's obviously the chance there's a confluence of several things, but I think the global warming aspect is probably the most critical factor. That's obviously the one that broke the camel's back, and it was a brick. It wasn't a straw. But I predict. I think there's several things coming together at once. But yeah, obviously the drought is a very serious problem. Obviously.
Yeah, and going off of in response to the infrastructure of it, one of the ways PG&E responded was just when there's high winds, their announcement was, we're just going to turn everyone's power off. So there were times where you had rolling blackouts throughout California. I think I went through a 4-day period where we had no electricity for that reason. And
Wow.
a lot of people had to plan accordingly, right?
Mhm.
You had to make sure everything in the fridge was either eaten or in ice packs. Like there's a lot of stuff that happens.
4 days is a long time.
Yeah.
A couple days
Yeah,
you can kind of pull it off, but 4 is like, no, the fridge is warm.
Well, and then the outdoor temperature, if it's either too hot or too cold, not having power is a real problem, as Elena could attest.
Yeah, for sure.
Luckily, where I am, the temperature never goes beyond the 40 to 60 degree stand. Well, actually, now it is, right? During the summertime, it's getting to 100 degrees when normally it should be like 70 is hot. So
Protected in the bay, yeah.
Wow.
yeah.
Okay, so the reason that I did the politics of carbon is got to be not just something that was futuristic and part of presidential campaigns. I guess things move, don't they? From campaign to election into what's actually going to come out of the election and really be onto the table. We saw $15 an hour, for instance, be an item that was used to really try to push together the Recovery Act, or push forward the Recovery Act and get a lot of rah-rah early on. And then we saw the change on that. It kind of fell off to the wayside. We'll see if it comes back in another form. But carbon politics and major environmental action was a core component of most of the debates from all the candidates. I'm just going to kind of think of some of them. Was the billionaire Tom
Steyer? Tom Steyer?
Yeah.
Steyer, that's right.
I mean, it was all about the environment for him. 100% of his campaign was like, that's what it is, folks.
Yeah.
So we're kind of coming back into that bandwidth area of being like, all right, what are the real points of contention? And as we go into our foreign policy stuff, I think that leads us into this conversation. I was going to play Deb. Should I start with Deb and then we go into this? Is that okay, Zach? Is that a crazy segue?
Yes. Please put my favorite secretary on the screen.
Hold on. I've got to figure out how to do this now.
These newfangled computers.
Dude, I'm so slow on this shit.
I'm a very reluctant tech user. I enjoy some of it, but boy.
So
okay.
Got it.
No, go ahead. I'm going to bring it up. Go ahead.
While Marty's bringing this up, definitely people should go and check out a previous episode where I think we covered the secretaries more in detail. But just for some context of Deb Haaland, she's the first Native American secretary. She is probably the favorite pick from the left in all of Biden's administration. So that's some context for who Deb Haaland is. She also supports the Green New Deal.
All right, here she is. We're going to listen to Deb.
From day one, President Biden has been clear that we must take a whole of government approach to tackle the climate crisis, strengthen the economy, and address environmental justice. At the Department of the Interior, I believe we have a unique opportunity to make our communities more resilient to climate change and to help lead the transition to a clean energy economy. That's why today I'm taking steps to align the Department of the Interior with the President's priorities and better position the team to be a part of the climate solution. First, I'm revoking a series of secretarial orders issued in recent years that are inconsistent with our commitment to protect public health, conserve land, water, and wildlife, and elevate science. Those previous orders unfairly tilted the balance of public land and ocean management toward extractive uses without regard for climate change, equity, or community engagement. In their place, I'm issuing a new secretarial order to prioritize action on climate change and pursue environmental justice throughout the entire department. I'm establishing a climate task force to coordinate work across the department, including accelerating renewable energy development and identifying actions to foster investments in energy communities. The order also provides guidance on how science may be used in the decision-making process and will improve transparency and public engagement in our decision-making process. I know that signing secretarial orders alone won't address the urgency of the climate crisis, far from it. But I'm hopeful that these steps will help make clear that we as a department have a mandate to act. With the vast experience, talent, and ingenuity of our public servants here at the Department of the Interior, I'm optimistic about what we can accomplish together to care for our land so that it is there for future generations.
Very good.
Can I just say that everyone who loves this great land that we live in needs to take a moment and realize that this is a point where we really need to realize the bullet that we just missed. Donald Trump ruined the Department of Interior. They changed so many micro, specific rules and regulations that they got rid of by executive order. They threw out science. Many of the people who worked in the government at that time had to try to take and keep records that they were supposed to destroy, that had been lifetimes of work. And so to hear the code language of that and to say that we're actually going to implement science and we're going to implement decision-making processes that include the environment as a primary discussion point instead of a ladder point or something we're fighting, that is a complete reversal, smackdown, train to the abdomen, ass kicking that Joe Biden just provided to the Donald Trump administration. So it hasn't been shared that much, but that's good news, everybody.
Sounds like you summed it up.
I just want to say, fuck yeah, it's good shit, man. That's what we needed is to win, and that's why we wanted to win.
Well, and by the way, if that's not the Department of Interior's job, then what is the Department of Interior's job? In other words,
Right.
Somebody might say, "Oh, that's kind of an extreme stance. I'm a petroleum guy and I like petroleum." Yeah, but the Department of Interior should be focused on helping our environment and preserving our country. And you might, for business reasons, want to continue to drill petroleum, but it makes sense that maybe that's not the way the Department of Interior would like to proceed. I mean, that's the way it should be. Like, that's what a regulatory department is,
Exactly.
I think Joe Biden taking the stance on it is one of the main reasons why he won. There's plenty of reasons why he won, but I think this is one of them, because from the progressive standpoint, a lot of progressives did not like Joe Biden. But when you compare Donald Trump on environment versus Joe Biden on environment, it is night and day. And I think that for a lot of progressives, the way they stomached it was Joe Biden isn't going to turn the world into an ash heap. That was the general thought process for a lot of progressives.
Let me illustrate the Venn diagram of Donald Trump's environmental policies and Joe Biden's environmental policies. They have no overlap whatsoever.
There's nothing connected.
They are completely standalone, separate. Yeah,
Let's go back.
Really.
Nate asks a critical question. Let's just make sure we know what this is about. Why is it called Interior? Anyone want to crack at that?
I'll take it. The Department of Interior is called that because the person in charge is in charge of all federal lands. So it's the interior of the country. It's our land.
And having one policy for all things means that we have to have policies inside of our lands, as well as when we get to our foreign policies, right? It's interior, it's domestic, interior. Right. And it's the land element of the interior, right? One of the things Michael Lewis discusses in his book, The Fifth Risk, is he talks about the reason that governments sometimes have to be inefficient is because they have to plan for things that do not happen. But if they don't have a plan for them, then it's bad governance. And
Marty,
guarantee now. So go ahead. Yes.
It's almost like you need to plan for a snowstorm in Texas.
Exactly. Wow.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah.
There it is.
Almost.
There it is.
Yeah.
And so they were talking about how at the time when Trump's administration guys came in, they were discussing what it would be like to have 121 million Americans leave the coasts and move to the inland. And that's when Trump's new administration threw all that data away. They threw it in the garbage can. But that's the kind of thing that you would want the Department of Interior to be like, wow, what would happen if, and you probably couldn't use the Mississippi River very much during that time either, because those water levels are going to go up. So you're going to have a lot of people in the hills of upstate New York, Pennsylvania, the mountains of the West. Like, what would happen if 121 million people had to move because the water went up 4 feet in 1 year?
It's not just that. It's not just that. What would happen if we lost California's Central Valley, one of the fertile lands of our country?
That's the kind of stuff that's a problem. I'll be honest. I'm in Wichita, Kansas. We're at like 1,100 feet above sea level. Like, global warming is never going to sink the Great Plains.
How would it affect Jeff? Is the fact that what would it look like, Jeff? How many people live in Wichita tonight?
500,000.
500,000. What happens if that becomes 6 million?
Well, again, I mean, I'm not trying to minimize it. The Central Valley of California, Florida, for example, the middle of Florida is like 27 feet above sea level. So, you raise the sea level 20, 30 feet, and you're going to lose all of Florida. But and maybe like the challenge, of course, is all the populated areas are very close to the water. But the point is, all of California moving 10 miles closer to the Sierra Nevada mountains. I mean, in other words, I don't know that everyone would have to flee all the way to Wichita. Do you know what I'm saying? There's a lot of land just right next to the really populated areas next to the water.
But do you know what there's not a lot of is built-in plumbing systems.
Sure. No, you'd have an infrastructure.
Not a lot of infrastructure. It's not like just bouncing LA over to Fresno would work. People would be like, dude, I'm out.
I mean, look at Venice, right? Venice is a much more real-time example. They've had to build a seawall for Venice because rainy days and high tide flood Venice because it's literally built at sea level. And so they've had to create these they're like these floating lock things that help break down the waves of the high tide and blah, blah, blah. Basically, they've had to create a lock system to try and keep the ocean water out of Venice at times. So those are the kind of things, those are the kind of challenges. And I don't know, what are we talking about, Zach, as far as water levels? If all the ice caps melted, how high does the water come up? Like 10 feet?
I'm not sure. I'm not exactly sure on the number, but the projections that I've seen is that if we continued at the rate we're going, within the next 100 years, the majority of the Florida Panhandle will be underwater, the California Central Valley will be underwater, and I think the Maryland, Delaware areas will be underwater as well.
Okay. So, I mean,
and a lot of
100 years to move out of those places. I mean, in a worst case scenario, I don't know that we're not, I think it would be more, personally, I think what's going to be more devastating is the drought, the added heat. You're going to have huge parts of our country that currently grow food that won't be able to, for example.
Well, let's pull back a second. Would you guys, would you say yes or no to the fact that coronavirus is at least in part due to some sort of global climate change? Like, pandemic is part of global climate change. Maybe this one may not be, but we've heard that's part of it. So
you're right in that in this one, there's not really evidence showing that this virus is caused by that, but there is truth in the fact that as our population is growing, we're cutting into more environment, and essentially what we're doing is we're bringing humans and animals closer together. And anytime you do that, you're increasing the risk of transmission.
Yeah, I would say population density is obviously a key factor. I mean, anyone who keeps track of deer populations and hunting and stuff knows that when the deer populations get too big, they get disease ridden because herds that should be standalone combine and touch other herds. So, I mean, overpopulation, I would say, key part of any pandemic. Deforestation probably plays a part. I don't see a direct connection to global warming, but it's all happening in the same system, so they're definitely related. But I mean, I have a hard time finding the causation between global warming and
I would say the things that are causing global warming are causing deforestation as well, right? And because it's causing deforestation, that's causing the effects of bringing humanity closer to these diseases. So I think, Jeff, you're right in that it's not global warming causing it, but it's two things that are being caused by man-made activities.
Some other man-made activities, let's switch gears again. Some other man-made activities are forever wars.
Correct.
And we are just hearing now that we are going to be done with the war in Afghanistan, which it almost feels like Russia handed to us. It was their forever war that they fought forever and changed the face of their changed the face of their nation, certainly of their wealth. And it could even be argued their morality. And I wonder about that too. This is 20 years of this war for us. And it's changed our interpretation of war. It's changed our dynamic of what we'll put up with, what we expect. It's changed how we deal with our veterans who come home, 20 years of veterans from the same conflict, potentially, as you meet some of these guys and women. What does it mean to end the forever wars? Seriously, what does that even mean now?
Well,
Cusack!
I think the first thing we should be clear is that we're not ending all the forever wars. We're ending one of them. But that's important. It matters. I think
it probably is the hardest one to get out of.
Yeah, I think I actually would disagree with that. I think Iraq is harder.
We can talk about that if you want to.
Yeah, but I think for one of the biggest ways I've looked at the forever wars is I have friends, I myself, who are born after 9/11, and some of my friends have joined the military. This means my friends are not going to die in a war that started before they were born. So that's where I'm coming from.
Wow.
I'd like to bring up too. I mean, it's we have to also talk about the ideas we're trying to fight extremists, and we have to understand too that we see it as liberation, but other people see it as occupation. When you occupy a country for 20 years, how would we like to have been occupied for 20 years? People, I don't think you help defeat extremism by occupying a country for 10 years or 20 years or, the whole lifetimes. So we have to think about what impacts, these types of situations are going to have ongoing. In other words, would any of us be surprised if in 20 years we're dealing with another wave of Afghanistan-based extremism? I really don't like to use any religion because I think extremism is separate from religion. Extremists, occupying a country for 20 years seems to me to be a way to create more extremists. Yeah. You can beat down the current regime that was feeding the extremists, but you and your own actions are creating extremists. And I don't mean to bash on the military at all. I mean, I love all military people that fight and everything else, but I mean, anyone who's known people in the military knows that there's these situations where people get put on disciplinary action because they get caught, having sex in a mosque or something because they two GIs snuck off to be romantic with each other, and they get caught in deflowering a sanctuary or something, So there's all these situations, just general PR problems with having troops in the country above, and because they're people. I mean, I'm not mad at those GIs for making a bad decision. I mean, they're people and they made a bad decision. But you multiply that by 20 years, and it's just the whole thing is just a real downhill slide, a slow downhill slide. So I think the thing we really have to really focus on, and I will say Donald Trump wasn't a war hawk, and I do appreciate that in him. We just really have to, the French told us not to go back to Iraq. French told us not to go to Vietnam. We told them you're stupid. We went to Vietnam and hated it. The French told us not to go to Iraq, and that was in the whole freedom fries and freedom whatever. They didn't want to call them French fries. So, maybe it's time next time to, listen to the French when they tell us we shouldn't go occupy somewhere for 20 years,
I mean, you could look at history. There's two places on Earth where it's been pretty consistent. Don't invade Russia during the winter, and don't invade Afghanistan. Right?
Never start a land war in Asia.
Never start a land war in Asia. Just don't start a fight in Afghanistan because it's just a mountain.
Because the British tried, they failed. The Russians tried, they failed. The Americans tried, they failed.
Yeah, the British tried way back during the Crusades, right? The British have tried a couple times.
Yeah. So, I mean, and the British were a superpower. At the time, the Russians were a superpower, and America is a superpower. 3 superpowers, none of them could get it done. And there's a reason for that. And it's time we start listening to history and realizing we can't nation build here. And America on its own isn't good at nation building in general, right? I mean, if you actually look at what we did, we created
let's do a post-mortem on the nation build. Go.
For which you want to start with
For
Nicaragua?
Afghanistan.
Okay, so
For Nicaragua, is that what you
Start
said?
with Nicaragua, yeah. Let's start with Nicaragua. We really nailed that one, didn't we? One of the biggest intelligence fails in world history was our attempt to help Nicaragua Nicaragua.
But
Go
no,
ahead, Zach,
let's
sorry.
do Afghanistan. Why did we go to Afghanistan? What were we going to do when we went? What was the mission statement?
So there were 2.
Who
So
remembers?
I've been talking to some
Thanks,
experts recently, so I got this fresh in my head. So the 2 main mission statements were catch and kill Osama bin Laden. That was that was one of the number ones. The second one was root out terrorism in Afghanistan. Those were the 2. We killed Osama bin Laden in 2011. And in terms of Al Qaeda organization in Afghanistan, did we really? It's questionable, right? We sort of got rid of them. They keep popping up. They're
Well, okay,
the thing
wait. There was Al Qaeda and there was the Taliban.
right.
And so then there was another layer on top of that, which may have not been the very first pieces of it, but very quickly laid on top of it was we're doing this to spread freedom, and and they hate our women. They hate how we treat our women. And so we're going to go over there and teach and protect the women from the Taliban. There was the whole genderization of this conflict right away as a freedom fighting move.
Right.
So I have two counters to that statement. Anytime anyone brings up, women's rights in Afghanistan, first one, if this is true, when are we going to invade Saudi Arabia? That's my first question. The second one is
there's a lot to put on
how
that.
can we? Yeah. The second one is how can we talk about women's rights in a different country when we can't guarantee them in our own?
Right. That's where I was going.
Exactly.
Yeah, we're not exactly in the best position to tell other countries they're not protecting women's rights. I mean, that's
Jeff. I'm going to cover you up for a quick second here because Sasha names it. This is
awesome.
critical. America needs to overcome the idea that it's going to install Jeffersonian democracies. I love how it's the Jeffersonian democracy because that was also maybe not right away with Afghanistan, but then definitely as a package deal with the Iraqi war was America is now in the business of seeding democracies around the world, and we're going to freedom fight to install democracy. That came along into Afghanistan, but I don't think it was the beginning of it. Was it, Zach? What were the 2 again?
The 2 were rooting out terrorism. Capture and kill Osama bin Laden, and root out terrorism, strictly the Al Qaeda from Afghanistan.
We were just going to go get them out of their caves as we went in. That's all. We were just going to go kick ass.
But then it quickly evolved into, okay, now we're fighting the Taliban, right? And we actually were successful for a while, but the Taliban have made a resurgence, and the Taliban actually control more of the country now than they did when we first started this war. So at this point, it's estimated that the Taliban control 1/3 to 1/2 of Afghanistan.
Tandra, yes, absolutely, that's true. But then we're just kind of talking about the sales pitch from George W. and friends who were telling us why we went. And as we leave this 20-year endeavor, so let's pull back. Let's go back even in the last 5 years. What has the Afghanistan war meant to us now? Comments on the side as well. What does it mean now? What does it meant 3 years ago when we were sitting under Trump's friggin' craziness? We just kind of let it go. I mean, that's kind of how I feel about it. It's been a forever war that we just have to keep funding because that's the new world order we've made. And we've picked a fight, and you just got to keep the fight going. It's easier to keep maybe it's the politics of engagement at all, and that the only way we can engage in some of these places, we think, is to fight. Militarization.
You know, I'm just thinking about this in the past 5 years. I mean, go back to 2008. Obama ran on getting us out of these wars, right? The culture for at least 13 years now has been, let's leave. That's been the culture. So
I've got something you might want to bring up. You know, we talk, apparently we're so concerned about Arab women being forced to cover their heads and not speak in public and things like that. You know, we've got Amish and Mennonites that cover their heads in public and don't raise their voices. And I mean, every argument we make about bashing Muslims, we can turn around and bash our own culture for. We've got politicians quoting the Bible when they make laws and then saying they're scared of Sharia law. Well, you're just trying to do Christian Sharia law. So anyway, sorry to regress for a second.
Fundamentalism is fundamentalism.
Exactly. And we have plenty of fundamentalism in the United States. I mean, to act like we've got it figured out and we should be rooting out fundamentalism elsewhere is pretty silly. We've got evangelical ministers saying people shouldn't take COVID vaccines and won't wear masks and wouldn't shut their church. I mean, so we have plenty of problems of our own on that.
Yeah, I do want to. I guess I'm going to make 2 points. One, it can always be a choice, right? Muslim women make the choice to be modest, right, as part of their religion. So we shouldn't go into anything assuming that they're being forced to. The reason I say this is because the French have recently passed a law saying that women or girls under the age of 18, might be 16, but 18 or 16, cannot wear a hijab. They are legally not allowed to wear that in France. So I'm just bringing that up because
that's right either.
Well, that part's a problem. The dress code, of course, is slightly a distraction. What I would say is a problem, say in Amish culture, is they have proven there's situations of sexual assault, mistreatment of women, and they have no voice because it's a very male-dominated and specifically clergy-dominated culture. So women wearing hijab in Iran doesn't upset me. The fact that there's 0 rapes in Iran upsets me because if a Muslim woman reports that she was raped, she gets stoned. So, there's outfits and then there's rules. But in America, we only actually punish a quarter of our accused rapists. So, again, it's like every rock we turn over, we're going to find that our own systems don't do much better. Quite frankly, they sound like they would do better on paper. They do better, but in application, we have our own problems on all those same issues. But yes, a woman choosing to wear a hijab. Women, we have Muslim women in Wichita that walk around the mall with their heads covered. I don't have a problem, especially in America. Someone choosing to be observant of their own religion, I'm totally fine with that because we don't have most of the oppressive system of the country that they may originate from, where they not only are wearing those clothes, but they're also subject to, if they take them off, they'll be killed or arrested or whatever. In America, it truly is a choice, right?
Yeah, and I guess the second point I did want to make, and this is kind of getting to what Tang has been saying in the comments, is so this is something that I've been saying for a little bit now, and I feel vindicated because a report has come out saying that I'm correct. So always listen to me, guys. But it's expected that the Afghan government is going to fall within 2 years and the Taliban will take over. Within 2 years, the Taliban will take over Afghanistan. And when that happens, you are going to see a massive step back in women's rights. That is a truth that we have to understand. Here's the thing, though. Is it America's job to stay in a forever war across the ocean to protect some women's rights? Because we control half the country.
I always felt the women's right. I felt the women's right topic was always icing on a shit sandwich. I mean, I always felt that was disingenuous. I'm actually kind of surprised it was even listed as a reason we went there. I thought that was always kind of bullshit, to be completely honest. I don't think we were there for women's rights because, as I just stated, the same country that supposedly was there to help women's rights just banned trans women from sports in several states and won't let transgender use the bathroom that they of the life they're living. I mean, we don't.
Well,
we're not.
Did you hear about
We're not
the
the pantheon
law?
for women's rights. We're not. The Florida law. What's the Florida law? You have to live in Florida.
No. school administrators can check trans women, or if they suspect a woman is trans, they can check their genitals. Kids.
What?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think all the states that are passing the laws about transgender athletes say that administrators can perform the inspection. So not even send them to a health official, which would make more sense, right? Send them to a local physician of some type, someone who's, medically certified. No, they can just apparently take them to a private space and pull down their pants, apparently.
But Jeff, the Democrats are the pedophile party.
Yeah, of course we are.
Well, okay, so that's that's important, because the idea that we could export the process of democracy as well as a morality code was very
Right.
much a part of the early 2000 evangelical marriage between George W. Bush and the Republican Party at that time. They were very much still into that early morality stuff. This was early on in the gay marriage discussion, and they were still on the winning side of the old hegemony, that they were not changing, and they were holding fast from any of this stuff. And so then we have these major cultural events happen, like gay marriage becoming legalized by the Supreme Court, or finally legal by the Supreme Court, and then the ramifications of that. And then we end up with Trump, where misogyny has been the hallmark of his core supporters,
And warped Christianity, warped
and
Christianity and misogyny.
And I saw, when I say that as a
Terrifying.
person who studied theology, one of the ways you call it, because some people are like, man, all religions are fundamentalists. No, they're not. Here's the critical difference: can you ask questions of your teacher or your preacher or your scripture? If you can ask questions of it and say, I don't know if I believe all that or any of it, then you're not a fundamentalist. If you are in a place where they're like, you have a question, we have to answer your question so that you don't have any more questions, that's where fundamentalism happens. And then all of a sudden it becomes a behavioral culture based on status anxiety. That's a whole process, another big language, where we hold each other into place based on cultural rules and stuff. So fundamentalism has moved back into our realm, and we tried to export our freedom and morals.
Yeah.
Seems like we've lost ours.
The same people that are against Sharia law will tell you that the biblical flood is true. It's a true story. Right. There were giants on earth because it's in the Bible, and everything in the Bible has to be true for them.
Well,
I mean, it's kind of upsetting.
The biblical flood was true.
Well,
I mean,
it wasn't global for 40 for whatever it's supposed
it was
to be,
not
40 days. Couldn't have been global. Couldn't have been 40 days.
No.
Yeah. So,
but it was. I mean, this is a real quick sidetrack, right? But a giant flood happened in Mesopotamia, and at the time, Mesopotamia was the world for the.
Right.
And this is documented in the, I think, Epic
Sure.
of Gilgamesh. So
Sure.
it's a fable based in truth. That's kind of what I.
Well, no.
Yeah.
See, now I know you're not a fundamental. You've just sold yourself out. Now I know you're not a fundamentalist, because a fundamentalist.
You use the word myth, right? That you
Yeah,
can't be a myth.
Nope. Based in reality is not good enough. You have to know it's true that the earth completely flooded for 40 days. You just have to know that.
Right.
There's no discussion. Yeah. These are the people we share our country with. People that believe the Bible literalists. It's quite astonishing, because anyone like Marty or my stepdad and mom that's been to seminary, they are taught that certain parts, especially of the Old Testament, are allegory. They're stories. They were lessons.
First year of seminary is just having your faith just completely destroyed.
Crushed.
Just like, if you can make it through that and then stick around, you're like, I don't know what the fuck I'm still doing here. I don't
The creation story predates the Bible and Jews. There's all these things about the Bible, which of course I guess people would argue is still true, because obviously God would have done it, and then people would have come around and they would have to rediscover it. Who knows? But the point is, there's all kinds of things that people are taught in seminary. And that's why most of your evangelicals and fundamentalists are led generally by lay people. They're generally led by people that are either more or less self-ordained or ordained by other fundamentalist organizations, which I've said before is why when someone says they go to a non-denominational church, I generally start asking a lot of questions because that is very dangerous. That's basically a clandestine organization. They might be great. You might be a non-denominational. It's an Episcopal minister that lost his commission, and he's just formed his own little church, and he's everything's fine. Or it can be anything else. It could be Satanists. It could be the Klan.
Jeff, right? The Church of
Exactly.
Jeff.
The Church of Jeff.
Weird thing about
follows all the right
denominations, while we fight about theological doctrine and history and other things, it's sort of like no one goes to buy a Crayola box of non-denominational colors.
Right.
You want red and you want green and you want blue and you want yellow because it's what it is.
Right.
Yeah.
And so if it's just a bunch of meh, then you got to kind of wonder what's going on in there. So that's the other way to describe that.
Yeah.
While all of this is happening, while we've been living this 20 years, while Zach was before you were around, which is crazy to think about this. Having you in this interview in that way is just really crazy. You've been born into this conflict.
Yeah.
And so, and all the propaganda that's gone along with it has been pre your experience. So I come back to this.
I mean, Desert Storm was in high school, right? Desert Storm was in like 92.
Yeah. China is moving in the world. All of this stuff is happening, and we're still playing these patty cake games. The choices made in 2000.
Taiwan's likely to be a very serious problem. Yeah.
And Taiwan has been a problem on the meter. It's been a blinking red light for at least 2 years. And we're just now like, oh shit, this is really going to go this way. China and North Korea are active in the Pacific. Let's go down. Let's just, Zach, give me the top highlights about foreign policy. We can get into Biden if you want to, but let's just talk about where we're at. Let's do it.
All right. So as a liberal Californian in the Bay Area, my chief concern right now is that the boba production from Taiwan is potentially limited. Nah. But really, 99% of our
bubble
boba
teas, your bubble teas are at risk. Is that what you're telling me?
Yes. Go to war over the bubble teas.
You got to watch what you need, man.
So 99% of boba comes from Taiwan. That's my transition into Taiwan is historically been one of the most delicate places that America has had to deal with. Essentially, our policy with Taiwan is it's not its own separate country. Like we will say, we're not saying it's a separate country, but we're going to give it a bunch of military aid to make sure it can defend itself against China. So it's this ambiguity. Words are hard, that we have with this to try to be able to support Taiwan, which is a democracy, and also not piss off China. And so right now what we're seeing is we've basically had this hands-off approach, or, hands-off, gonna give you money on the back end approach from the 70s all the way up until the Trump administration. Under the Trump administration, America took a more, we believe Taiwan is a legit country kind of stance. We haven't officially gone out and said it, but under the Trump administration, we sent some of our own officials to Taiwan, which was a big move. And that really angered China. And so recently what's been happening is Biden has kind of continued with this. We're going to see China and we're going to see Taiwan, and we're going to continue having diplomatic relations with Taiwan. How China's responded with this is, well, there was American diplomats in Taiwan. They sent their navy into the strait between the island of Taiwan and mainland China, and they did live fire military exercises as a show of force. And even more recently, they have done flyovers with their air force over Taiwan. So they are doing extremely provocative things right now. Here's the somewhat good news. Most of our military officials believe that China is 2 to 3 years away from any serious type of incursion into Taiwan. So depending on how you look at that, with all the things going on in the world at this moment, 2 to 3 years is a long time. Or you can look at it
what
as...
would the incursion look like into Taiwan that isn't the police state that has been moving in with the anti-democratic movements and the arresting of journalists and things like that? Like, it feels like China has already taken its grip. And as I looked at Trump's policies, I felt like he absolutely acquiesced to China And when he did send in the advisors, I felt like it was late, like it was after he'd already lost the chessboard.
Well, you have to remember, I think you're actually talking about Hong Kong, right? Because Taiwan is not.
I am talking about Hong
Yeah.
Kong. What am I? Yeah, I'm sorry.
But the model
Thank
might
you. I'm
hold.
sorry.
I mean, the model might still hold, though. I mean, I kind of felt you were saying, the Hong Kong model might be. I mean, China calls Taiwan China, right? Do they not have any military or police forces on Taiwan at all? They've left them sovereign.
So in effectiveness, Taiwan is a sovereign nation, but very little countries actually recognize that because they don't want to piss off China. So to answer,
we don't
Marty's
even
question,
formally recognize it.
Right.
We formally have the one China. We formally believe
Right.
Taiwan is China, but we also, of course, have sympathy for Taiwan and keeping it independent.
right? Here's some of the reasons why. One, Taiwan is a democracy. Two, keeping with the American values, Taiwan was actually one of the first country, I think, was the first country in Asia to legalize gay marriage, right? So it is one of the more progressive, not progressive, but more Western countries. Something to give context to this is right before World War II, you had the, I guess, Democracy Party of China versus the Communist Party of China. And I believe it was like the Nationalist Party. I think that's what its name was. They were winning, but then the Japanese came in, and the nationalists and the communists decided, okay, we're gonna stop fighting each other and fight the Japanese. The nationalists took the biggest hit, and because they took that big hit after the war, the communists were able to take over the nationalists, and the nationalists fled to Taiwan. So I think at this point in time, there's actually the native Taiwanese population is almost gone. It's almost all like ethnic Chinese. But with that point aside, essentially, to answer Marty's question, what would it look like? It would be a full-scale military invasion of the island.
Wow.
But to do a full
Because
scale,
you're dealing with an ancient grudge.
I guess the question is, what does the Taiwanese military look like? In other words, to do a full scale invasion of Taiwan, that would infer that there's some military opponent to be fought. I mean, am I missing something? Like, I wouldn't stand my army up against China if I were Taiwan. I mean, I think I'd be like, okay. I mean, like, you're going to fight China.
That's the question for Uncle Sam.
Yeah,
So
that's the problem.
for the past 50 years, while we've been saying one China, we've been giving military aid to Taiwan.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where it's coming from. Taiwan receives military aid from the United States.
Yeah, not the kind of military aid that lets them stand up against China. That's the kind of military aid that allows them to not be overtaken by the Philippines or Indonesia. Like, that's not anti-China defense in my mind. I mean, we haven't given them that kind. I mean, they'd be.
Well,
armed.
I mean,
you wouldn't be able to see the buildings.
Well,
They'd be a big steel wall.
I mean,
I don't know.
Jeff.
Yeah, maybe just enough military support. I think he froze for a second, so I'll just talk for a second. Maybe enough military support that they can, at least show that they would fight. But I think he's full on hung up. I do have a picture. If you want to switch to the picture real quick, this is one of the naval bases that China's been building. They've built several of these in the South China Sea. They've taken either existing islands or built them organically and built bases. So this is a naval base with an airsfield, a naval base, and a port entrance. So they're basically turning islands into aircraft carriers, stationary in the South China Sea. I don't know how many there are of these, but there are several. And then what
Zach,
they do
are
is,
you with us in audio?
I think he's full on.
He's muted.
All right,
Oh,
I'm
he's
back.
He's
Okay, I'm
back.
back. Sorry,
I was showing one of the military islands that China's built.
All right, go, Zach.
Yeah, Russian hackers came in and they didn't want me to give you this message. So,
Dude,
That's
it's
right.
too much knowledge flowing.
Snowden attack.
so I guess the counter is if you're in Taiwan, you're going to stand up no matter what because you're fighting for your freedom, right? Like, who would have said that the American revolutionaries would stand to the British, right? Like, no sane person would say, yeah, the revolutionaries with their, their
Well, I mean, I
hunting
gotta
guns are going to
say,
stand
if
up
you
to
were going to be
regulars.
taking over the Chinese, and it was like, I'm not going to have my rights, I'm not going to have what I have. There might very well be that moment.
Right.
I think warfare was dramatically different during the American Revolution. I mean, it was fought in basically the same style.
Well, I guess this gets into modern politics. I mean, are we a pat a cake? Are we doing pat a cake politics, or are we ready to go to war with other nations to stop them? And that's as you showed this little atoll or whatever it is that they built, the Chinese have been building these little islands to protect. We've been down this road before in the Pacific with powers that are like, you know, we build a bunch of shit out here, nobody can stop us. And economically, you know, our biggest ally over there is Japan and South Korea.
Yeah.
Trump took so many troops out of South Korea because he loved Kim Jong-un. He loved him. So I don't know. Asia and the Pacific is where it's at. Like that's the future of our conversation. And California is the New York City to the west.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess to kind of give that final note with Taiwan, it doesn't look like we're going to be entering into a war within the next couple years, but compared to the other conflicts, some military experts have been saying this is the most likely thing to draw us into direct contact with a war with China. Because part of, to answer, I guess part of to really answer Jeff is there's somewhat of an expectation that you're not fighting Taiwan, you're fighting Taiwan and America. That's part of like the unwritten rules with this. Yeah. So now let's jump to North Korea, right? Yeah. Something that Marty just brought up. So recently, I think a week ago, Kim Jong-un came out saying that they were going to experience the biggest famine since the 1990s. And in the 1990s, the North Koreans experienced a famine that killed almost 3 million North Koreans. And wow. Yeah. And part of this is one, the U.S. has put a lot of sanctions on North Korea. There is a lot of people who like to, say, not to go against Marty right now, but there is a lot of people who like to say Trump was too weak on North Korea. He did put a significant amount of sanctions on the North Koreans. Joe Biden has also put sanctions on the North Koreans as well. So those sanctions have been stifling North Korean economic growth. Plus, North Korea was terrified of COVID. Kim Jong-un understood that his healthcare system could not handle a COVID outbreak, so he completely shut the country down. Wow. So I think their trade with China dropped by 80%.
Wow.
Yeah, so economically it's looking bad. There is the Russian ambassador to North Korea. He is still there right now. He is making the claim that they are not in danger of a famine, but he is making the claim that they are in the worst economic situation that North Korea has ever been in. So given all this,
that's not good.
North Korea's
volatility.
Weak right now. No. Right. So here's the question. North Korea is very weak. You have a strong man who's in a weak position. How does Joe Biden respond? Should he respond by doubling down and going hardball with this and trying to force Kim Jong-un to either make some serious acquisitions or give up the nuclear program, which I don't think will happen? Or does Joe Biden go, hey, work with us? That's the honest question. Does he try to do what Trump did?
And do it better?
Sure, yeah. Without saluting any of the North Korean generals.
Well, or just...
It's so hard to not salute them.
or walking in their territory.
Yeah.
No, I think he'll probably do something like that because it's not good. It's not good for anyone to have a starving nation. They make bad decisions. Anyone who's hungry makes bad decisions. We all know that. And so that's the first thing. But making it hurt beyond the famine. I mean, it's war.
One thing we gotta consider though, if you look at a map of Korea, every single one of North Korea's ballistic missiles are in range of Seoul. And that is a metropolitan area of upwards of 20 million people.
Yep.
It's easy. So, we just trade ICBMs. They give us their ICBMs and we give them food.
That'd be great.
Solved.
That may be, but I doubt that's going to probably work that well.
I'm done.
Yeah,
but
thanks.
I win.
If you're Kim Jong-un, you give up your weapons and now you're ripe for invasion. So,
yeah, no, he's not going to do that.
No, he's not going to do that. Of course, it's not that easy.
Right.
Talk to me about. Let's lift up what's going on in Russia. Let's talk about Russia and Ukraine. Let's talk about that right now because that's the potential hot war that we could all be talking about very soon, is what's going on in Russia.
So good news is that it might not be like that. And I'll explain
Okay.
why. So for basic background, Ukraine, it's been Russia recently in 2014 annexed Crimea. In eastern Ukraine, you have two provinces that have large ethnic Russian populations. This is because the USSR, when it controlled Ukraine, it moved people here. Now, these Russian populations have created a separatist movement where they have essentially created somewhat of a civil war within Ukraine. They have attempted to leave Ukraine in the hope of joining Russia. There's only a small pocket of eastern Ukraine that is officially under separatist hands, but that is the situation now. So you have part of eastern Ukraine under separatist Russian hands, and you have Crimea under Russian hands.
And the people who are caught in this are pretty scared shitless.
To a degree, yes. Russia's been really just been posturing. If you look at the troop levels that they've been putting, they have about 40,000 troops amassed in Crimea, and you have about 40,000 additional troops massed up along the eastern border with Ukraine. So what military experts have been saying is this is only enough for a limited excursion. This is not enough for a full-scale invasion of Ukraine. So even though the Russian stance has been, we're willing to invade you, their actual military suggests that they're not going to do that.
What do you guys think of Biden's push on the Russian sanctions in regards to some of this stuff? Sorry, go ahead.
That's part of it. So one of the reasons that they're doing this buildup, I think there's three things that Russia is hoping to accomplish by having troops on the border. The first one is to ensure that Ukraine does not become part of NATO. The second one is to ensure that Ukraine does not invade the separatist region. They want that separatist region to be under the separatist control. And three, they want Biden to relax on the sanctions. I think those are the three big things.
That's a main thing, because it's hurting them.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can drive people into third world status pretty quick with sanctions, I think.
Right. And Russia's trying to show there's consequences if you do that. So I really think this is posturing. And what has happened is Joe Biden reached out and said he was the one who wanted to have a conversation with Putin. He wanted to have the meeting. So what's been going on in the Russian press is they're saying, look at our strong Putin. He caused Biden to blink. And now we're going to have a meeting. So I think what the Russians have been able to do is convince the Russian public that Putin was strong, the Russian government was strong, and they're forcing the Americans to the table. And so I don't think it's going to result into a large hot war.
How does Biden ever come soft on sanctions to Russia during his first term? How can he possibly ever look back on not just crushing their nuts every chance he gets? Because I mean, he's made the commitment about it just in the last week about they're not going to get by with this shit.
Yeah, that's the $1 million question, right? I can't give you the answer. That's something we're going to have to watch.
Fair enough. Yeah, but it's a critical place to watch because he cannot blink on that.
Right. Yeah, I mean, there's something at stake for both, right? You have the international foreign policy between it, but the Russians have their diplomatic or their internal policies, and the Americans have their domestic policies as well. So,
and I think the truth of it is, I think we're just getting started learning about how bad this hack was. I think that's why Biden can't blink on it either, is because he may not be done letting power. He may not be done bringing pain and thunder to these people. Like, that's probably another reason why Putin is moving some posturing now, because he knows how bad it could get. Yeah, and I'll tell you what, if this guy dies, if this guy who's in the in jail, Putin's adversary in the election dies from his hunger strike, and they're saying he's days away from death. I mean, he's a 50-year-old man. He's in great shape, and he's hunger striking because he's like, this country's fucked, and I'm done, and I'm going to make a statement. There are things shaking right now in the Putin administration over there, whatever they call it, the Putin government.
Yeah.
Oh, they call it the Democratic Russian government, I'm sure.
Yeah.
The people's government, of course, is what they say.
What's interesting is this is something that we kind of called Trump out, but what's going on right now is America's not at the negotiating table in a sense. I mean, of course, Biden says he's willing to talk, but really the Germans and the French are the ones who are kind of really facilitating negotiations. And we've seen the Germans take up a larger role throughout the Trump administration as well. If you look at the conflict between the Greeks and and Turkey, right? The Germans facilitated that. So now we're looking at this, and the Germans first, and then the French kind of second are facilitating this, along with the Ukrainians talking to the Turkish government. So I think you have the other NATO forces, and you have the European forces kind of working together and talking together, trying to push back against Russia. So it's this interesting dynamic where it's not America versus Russia in the same way it was 50 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah. Sasha just absolutely is stunning analysis tonight. And I'm not kidding, man. This is like the best thing I've ever seen in my life. Sorry, Jeff. Relax sanctions in exchange for truth on Trump. I love this idea. Making it like full tilt public knowledge. We'll relax our sanctions for Trump. America heals with tarnishing Trump. And that would be very interesting. But then again, you're asking a former KGB agent to give up his bag of tricks. And I don't know if that'll ever happen.
Well,
but I like the idea.
You're assuming giving up his bag of tricks assumes there were any tricks in the bag. In other words, things that Manafort and Trump handed over, that we've already heard the starts of with the Mueller report. It's not exactly selling your secrets to say, yeah, we sent that lawyer to talk to him, and yeah, they talked about our help for them, and yeah, there was the cover story of children and the whatever act, I can't remember what act it was that banned us adopting Russian children. Yeah, I mean, we kind of went in there under that guise, but then here's what we actually told them, and here's what they agreed.
If we could get the full notes from the Russian side of that Trump never allowed the notes to be taken of, and we were somehow allowed and verified and were able to see that that was the actual notes taken, that might be worth some sanctions to know what he did.
Right. Mm-hmm. I don't think there's a lot. I mean, I could be wrong, but I mean, there might be an audio recording of either Trump or someone close to him speaking directly with somebody in Russian intelligence. That could definitely exist. And something like that where, one of them called, a member of the intelligence of Russia, knowing that they were intelligence for Russia. I mean, that's not spycraft. You know what I mean?
Well, and Sasha's right. That would literally be the very best and fastest way for this country to heal, is to find a piece of evidence that was a full tilt smoking gun where you're like, holy shit, there's no more conversation about it. Although I feel like we've done that so many times.
Yeah.
The Russians admitting to it would be big, but I don't think they'd admit to it. It's the same reason why America doesn't formally admit to helping Taiwan, even though we are, admitting it is another level.
Right.
Yeah.
What about the Middle East? Let's go over the Middle East real quick. Let's
just solve that. We got 20 minutes left.
Well, let's set a baseline for where we are. What's the new conflict? What's the old conflict? What's on the agenda?
So the Iran deal, right? Iran deal. I think Biden screwed the pooch on this one. I am very disappointed. He said he was going to get us back into the Iran deal. His administration has had a 3-month window where what the Iranians said was, America stepped out, you guys backed away from it. So what you have to do is you need to step in first, and then we'll come back in. I think America should have taken that deal. Joe Biden wanted the Iranians to do it first. The Iranians said, no, you have to. And here we are. The Iranian deal is looking less and less likely with each day. And because of an Israeli attack on Iran, they are now saying they're going to enrich their uranium levels to 60%, which is getting very close to the necessary level.
Didn't this recent attack on the Iranian, wasn't it a missile manufacturing or nuclear manufacturing facility?
I believe
Didn't
I'm
it
not
set them back on their timeline? I thought it did.
regardless. Before, the Iranians were in a situation where they were saying, "Hey, we will stop on our own, like we will control ourselves." And now they're in a situation where they're saying, "We're going to ramp up." And
Yeah.
I just don't think. I think Biden screwed the pooch on this one.
And so it did hit, and it did send them back in time in terms of the ability. But you're right. I think it gives them resolve to say, "Oh, you knocked our capacity out that we were kind of half-assing with over here. Now it's full tilt. We're going to do this as soon as we possibly can."
It was an attack on Iran's nuclear program.
Yeah.
Okay.
We don't want to spread fake news.
So I think Zach is saying Biden screwed the pooch by not just accepting the deal immediately before some antics could happen where we are right now, and just said, you know what, let's get back into this deal as soon as possible.
Right. And the way I see it is, if we get into the deal and then we find out the Iranians are not keeping their end, we just leave the deal and go back to sanctioning them. Right. I don't see how we're. Yeah. So I think Biden should have done it.
Yeah, that was what was stupid about Trump tearing up the deal. Is it's like he didn't feel the deal was strong enough, so he let him completely off the leash. You know, I mean, in other words, why would you take any deal that has any restrictions that may be observed at least partially and just say, well, I don't like it because it doesn't cover everything, and whatever they were talking about briefcases of money, so let's just undo everything we did and leave them with absolutely no controls. It's obviously ridiculous. But you'd obviously have, if you have an agreement that has these requirements be met and they're breaking one, you would always have the chance to walk away. In other words, it's not like you say, okay, we agreed that we're all going to do the right thing. And we're going to trust each other, and we're just going to, not look at each other's nuclear stuff for 4 years. I mean, that's not how it works. There were inspections and things involved. And anyway, yeah, you join an agreement. You don't sell the house to do it. And if the other person's violating, then you formally say we are now maybe at war with Iran because they violated their agreement.
Question for the wonks in the audience. Is there any word about what Joe Biden is going to do with Turkey? If not, I'm going to research it this week because I'm just curious. Turkey and Erdogan over there was such a friend of Trump while they were doing extremely fascist political moves and around their elections. And I'm just curious to see, because wasn't Turkey going to leave NATO at one point? And they didn't get a chance to leave NATO, or were talking about leaving NATO. I mean, these are big deals.
No.
Right.
I know isn't there a Trump,
right.
isn't there a Trump hotel?
We're such Americans. We kind of know that it's over there.
I could probably get it right in 4 or 5 guesses.
No, but it's fun. I watch the BBC and you're just like, wait, there's other countries out there? It's just crazy.
When researching, a lot of the stuff came from BBC. So,
yeah.
I mean,
what else in the Middle East needs to be lifted up as we kick off an administration here? We're still in the first 100 days.
So I guess there's two more countries to highlight. The first one, said it earlier, say it again, Saudi Arabia. So
what do you do with them, man?
This is another thing where a lot of progressives were very angry about, but it's kind of been swept under the news cycle at this point. The journalist who was murdered by the Saudi prince, America did not respond to that. We allowed the Saudis to do it and get away with it. We had a commission saying that Saudi Arabia did it, but once we said, Saudi Arabia, you did it, and now I'm not going to punish you. That's what we did.
We set a boundary that we didn't follow through.
Right.
Not only was he killed by the Saudis, but at the time his legal residence was in the United States. So we were giving him sanctuary too. But
the second big thing with the Saudis is they are the leading force in the biggest humanitarian crisis in the world right now, which is Yemen. And under Trump, we were fully funding them. Now, Biden, in the first week, might have been the first day even, he said, we're not going to support Saudi Arabia in any offensive capacity. A lot of progressives looked at that and said, whoa, why are we adding that, little in offensive capacity? Because what that means for progressives, what we see is okay, Saudi Arabia is saying, well, we need to defend ourselves by bombing them. So we're defending. This is a defensive attack. It's a defensive preemptive attack, right? It's that like jargon that they use to get around this. So that is what Saudi Arabia is doing now. They've seen the United States response saying, we're not going to support you in offensive attacks on Yemen. And so what Saudi Arabia has now come out and is saying, well, none of this is offensive. This is all defensive. We're all defending ourselves because
the ball has been moved with Saudi Arabia. We used to play this game with them. The game is, what does it mean to be my ally? Right. Something like that. And so it used to be America used to fight. That's why we went to support Kuwait. That's why we were in Iraq is because, we were doing some of the fighting that our friendly friends, our very rich friends, our Saudi friends needed some muscle. And we had the policy where we would provide the muscle, or we would find a way for the muscle to get there through coalitions and nation building and whatever we had to do in the UN to support their interests. But then we started allowing them to have weapons. And that was a major policy shift.
Yeah.
And now that they have weapons, and we, under Trump, have actually helped pay for their weapons, so now we're morally on the hook for their crazy shit. And they're
we're not just paying for it. These are American weapons.
And American weapons. So we've moved a long ways with the Saudis.
Right.
And they haven't gotten any less rich.
I'd also bring up, too, that non-offensive aid, they were talking about how all Obama did with Ukraine was provide blankets, and Trump provided these anti-tank missiles or whatever, rockets. I think it's very important to realize, maybe everyone already does, but in a military, there are a lot of resources that don't have guns on them, that don't carry bombs. I mean, you've got all your logistics stuff. You got tractor trailers, you got trucks, you got refueling vehicles, you've got all that stuff. Then you've got literally blankets, cots, toothbrushes. I mean, you look at a military budget, the offensive part, obviously in America, when you're talking about stealth bombers and the top of the line jets, of course, there's a lot of money in the gun edge of the chart. But for a country like Saudi Arabia, you could provide them with everything but the things that actually explode. And that is going to be a lot of stuff. And then if they go to war with it, the fact that, they bought the guns from Russia, but they're all riding on a big American truck, so I would just point out that while you may be right that they may even call attacks defensive, if they're only talking about the rockets, but all the troops drove to the rocket site in American vehicles and used American software and but the rockets officially were actually purchased from Kuwait or whatever.
Zach.
So let me just clarify what I was trying to say there. Under the Trump administration, we were selling them bombs so they could use them to attack. Now, under the Biden administration, we're selling them bombs so they can defend. That's essentially, So
when I hear non-offensive, I assume that's no poo-poo, no pee-pees or poo-poos or pew-pew-pews, but maybe I'm wrong.
No, it's the pew-pew-pews. So.
Well, then it's bullshit. It's a bullshit statement.
So we've moved to completely. They're just a good customer of our weapons.
Right, and look, I think
that's a big deal.
This is why I think the Democrats are substantially better than the Republicans, in that I think the Democrats have the ability to say our leader is wrong, right? Like our leader's doing something we don't approve of. And so if this continues, and I based on the policy, it looks like it will, I think Democrats need to have the resolve to say Joe Biden is wrong on continuing to send military aid to Saudi Arabia while this is happening and while they're using it against the Yemenis people.
Israel.
Yep,
Political catastrophe going on right now with Netanyahu. Can't keep a government together, can't keep from being impeached or whatever the process is, where he's indicted. I guess he's actually been indicted on several counts of abuse and all sorts of shit.
Pop quiz: which country gets the most foreign aid from America?
Israel.
I would assume.
Yeah,
as
Israel.
led into it, I assume it's Israel. Yeah.
Yeah. So here's the question Biden needs to really consider. Are we going to keep sending all this aid to Israel as they screw up the Middle East, as they attack Iran, make things worse? Look, this is not even my words at this point. This is some prominent Israeli
Egypt
activists.
is a mess. Yes, it is.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
So there are many people who are calling Israel an apartheid state at this point.
Mm-hmm. Yes, they are.
Yeah. So we need to really consider why is Israel one of our biggest customers when it comes to weapons, and why are we giving them so much money in foreign aid when they are being an apartheid state? That's something Joe Biden needs to respond to. And this is why I hate Tony Blinken, and why we had that episode a month or two ago where I put Tony Blinken on my shit list. Is Tony Blinken has come out and said the U.S. embassy will stay in Jerusalem. That's not a two-state solution. That's not peaceful. That's saying we're siding with the Israelis on this, and that is continuing Trump policy.
Boy, what I can't wait to read the books about the internal political losses or consternation that has led to that discussion and that final that final piece from Biden and his policy, because that seems like a terrible thing to not retract.
Well, I mean, while we're on terrible things to not retract, just recently Biden said that he was going to keep the level of refugees the same level as Donald Trump. Now he got a significant, I think that's like 16,000 when he said he would raise it to 62,000. So that got extreme pushback. You actually had the left, I think, like AOC, the general, the left, Pramila Jayapal, all these leaders, even some more moderate Democrats came out and said, "What are you doing? That's insane." I think that was the strongest push.
Tendrell has given heavy pushback on the idea that Israel is an apartheid state, and that's a respected opinion. I appreciate that. Thank you.
I'm not going to comment on Israel. It's a freaking complete quagmire. I do want to say I researched real quickly. Biden said on the conflict, this is from February 2nd, Biden said in the conflict in Yemen, which has killed 100,000 Yemenis and displaced 8 million, it's created a humanitarian and strategic catastrophe. The war has to end. And to underscore our commitment, we're ending all American support of offensive operations in the war in Yemen, including relevant arms sales. So I read that as we're not selling them any arms for the offensive actions in Yemen. But, I mean, who knows what's actually changing hands, right? I mean, who watches those trade-offs? Israel's a real nightmare situation. I completely understand the need for a Jewish homeland. I support the idea of people being able to live somewhere in peace, especially after World War II, showed that the rest of the world wasn't able to handle it. The problem is the place they picked already had people in it, and it's one of the most contested, the Temple Mount is the most contested football field in the fucking world. And so now we've got a situation where, a country formed itself by acquiring land and then displacing the inhabitants. Palestinians are second-class citizens in their own country. It's an octopus with 12 poisonous legs. I mean, I don't have an answer. I want peace in Israel. I want the Israelis to have peace and be treasured people. I want Palestinians to have peace and be treasured people. I want the Arab countries around Israel to stop fighting them. I want Israel to stop fighting the Arab states around them. But I don't know. I mean, to me, it's just like one of those situations. It's like there's just you can argue it from absolutely all sides, and I really don't. I don't know. Israel's a painful one, and I'd have to research it a lot more to have really any educated statements. They definitely get antagonized by their neighbors. They definitely antagonize their neighbors, but it's I mean, I don't know what to say. We have apparently 3 world religions that think you have to control the Temple Mount for your God to love you. It's to me asinine. It's literally everyone wants to control home base. It's like a weird game of tag, and 3 world groups are fighting over one little football field because apparently God can't find you if you're not at that one football field when he comes back or whatever. So Israel's a total and complete mess, and I don't know what to say. I don't think you can let it fall, and I don't think you can support it against the inertia that's trying to destroy it. So what do? You either continue it with our aid and our military force. Obviously, they have the second largest air force in the world, if I'm not mistaken, made up primarily of American jets. So we're standing them up, but then they've they've displaced the Palestinians, and they've been at constant war with their Arab neighbors. So it's just I don't know, man. To me, it's just an endless. I think it's scary though that, for example, what Zach brought up and what's been brought up before by some of our Congress people, any criticism of Israel is taken as anti-Semitic, and that is a problem. We should be able as a country to say, I have concerns about our funds for Israel, without someone turning around and saying you're anti-Jewish. No, I'm very pro-Jewish.
But I know I know
it's so dangerous.
You can't.
Zach would have been kicked out of Congress for what he just said. You know what I mean? But he's being honest, and he's not anti-Semitic. No. He's just saying, look, we're spending all this money to prop up a state. It's just such. It's the confluence of so many issues in one little place. It's just. Every time someone starts talking about Israel, I generally just like close my eyes and walk away. Because I will say my mom visited the Holy Land, and what she left with was a real love of the Palestinian Christians. You know, there's a lot of Christian Palestinians that have a curfew separate from the Israelis in their own land, in their historical land. And that's not right. That's not right. Palestinians shouldn't have a curfew that Israelis don't, in their own land.
Yeah.
In my opinion. Now, we could go talk about the atrocities against the Israelis. They're not, they've taken their pain and they've been mistreated. So, boy, honestly, it's just like, it's just a total nightmare.
Add on top of that what we started the show with, which is the politics of carbon.
Right.
The politics of oil, the politics of that era, or I'm sorry, of that whole area. And decisions that are made around oil and around logistics and again, back to your allies. What makes an ally in that region? Well, you usually have to buy your allies. That's the way it works over there.
Tango makes a good point too, that most of the money is spent to purchase American-made weapons, not in Israel. So that's another good point. They're using a lot of the money we give them to defend themselves, not build up their own people. So it's and then any criticism of Israel is considered anti-Jewish. Then you've got other people that are saying we have to protect Israel because the Israelites are God's chosen people, and it says in the Bible you have to protect. So it's like, wait a second. So we got a biblical argument for it, and it's anti-Semitic to be against it. How do you have a geopolitical situation that then is also cross-threaded with a theological problem? I mean, it's just, my gosh. And then mix in, just to make the problem even easier to solve, mix in that many of these Israelis are World War II refugees from death camps in Germany. I mean, great. It's just, the whole thing is just a big, complex, difficult situation. And I think there's arguments to be made in all directions. I mean, I don't know that anyone's perfect in the whole situation.
All right, we're running into the back end of the show. I want to ask another question about foreign policy. This is a little different one, but it's going to utilize the Afghan war and the end of the forever wars in a different way. Y'all remember Abu Ghraib?
Yeah. That was the end of Rumsfeld.
Remember the unbelievable, couldn't believe that Americans were torturing their soldiers. You remember Guantanamo Bay and the dogs barking and the people putting their hoods on and making them sit in uncomfortable positions for 18 hours and not letting them sleep in Guantanamo Bay. You remember how those at one point were incredible ethical and moral discussions that we were having as a nation. Should we close Guantanamo Bay? Should there be these off-site gray zones? I think that's the right word, gray zones or gray areas, where they could go and waterboard people legally in some ship in the middle of wherever. Seems like a long time ago, doesn't it? Where we were worried about those ethical questions.
Yeah.
Have they gone away?
I believe Trump made some casual pro-torture comments, did he not?
I mean, one of the biggest reasons why progressives will say Obama went back on some of his things was Guantanamo Bay, right? He promised he would close it. I believe on his first day, he signed an executive order saying that he would close it, and then it never came to fruition. Guantanamo Bay stayed open. It's stayed open under Trump. I have not heard it. Actually, you know what? I don't think Guantanamo Bay was said at all during the entire 2020 primaries. General
right.
Bay.
Like
No
that's
one
where our
talked about it.
ethic has moved, man. I mean, I'm just being an observer of that conversation. Those were bleeding heart liberal talking points, man.
Yeah, and Merrick Garland, he has actually was one of the judges who kind of upheld some of the things that were going on in Guantanamo Bay. So I think that's kind of been put aside,
In
right?
January of 2021, 731 of the 780 detainees were transferred. 40 remain and 9 died while in custody. So this makes it sound like there's 40 detainees in Guantanamo Bay.
40 too many. We should also
Well, think about what it costs to imprison those people.
right.
Well, and by the way, to Marty's point, you just put those 40 people on one section of an aircraft carrier and just keep them on international waters all the time? I mean, there's
Guantanamo
1,000.
Bay. I
It's
go
really
back to this. Let's go back to Obama. Why did he not choose to close Guantanamo Bay? How come? He fucking needed it.
I didn't realize it was-
He needed a place where he could do what they do at Guantanamo Bay. I believe, Zach, that this is where we get into this idea of the liberal or democratic corporatist. What do I want to call this? Mealy-mouthed ethics. Right. Mealy-mouthed morality, where we're like, well, we believe this, we believe that. And then except if it gets in the way of my pension or my geopolitical norms, or you know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah.
Until it causes pain.
Right. From what I've seen is that torture doesn't work. Even if we're not even talking about is torture moral. Torture doesn't even work. So why do we need an off-site non-American place to torture people when we know it doesn't even
something
work?
happens, we need to fucking get an answer, Zach. Whether it's right or wrong, we need a fucking answer. You know what I'm talking about? It's the Russians are putting attack ads for American troops. There's your answer. Turns out to be false, right? Yeah. Torture doesn't work. People will say whatever the hell it takes to not be tortured.
I guess my question is, and maybe I'm just an idiot, the reason it's such a good location, right, is because it's basically on Cuba. Yeah. So nobody could go look at it, right? Like no Americans could go look at it.
Right. And it's international friggin' we can do what we need to do over there.
But isn't Area 51 a place that isn't accessible to the public?
That's inside of our borders. It doesn't count.
So what? But they can still torture people there.
No, because we're talking about the difference between when you are on American land, you have essentially the laws of America. They're on Cuban land, technically. Like that's how this has been put. So the laws and protections of America don't apply to those prisoners. That's my understanding of it.
I mean,
absolutely.
They're under the possession of the American military. So obviously, anything we do to them. So we argued that it doesn't qualify under the Geneva Convention for some reason. I have no idea exactly how that argument went. I guess because they're terrorists, so they don't have a formal army that they're in.
Well, I mean, America's terrible when it comes to that kind of stuff in international law, right? Well, I don't think America's signed like the human rights like document or code or whatever. Like every country has signed the human rights agreement, and America is like one of 3 that won't.
Well, it'd be interesting to see what the rest of the world would say about situations like George Floyd if we had signed a human rights accord.
Right.
Yeah.
And there was another vote in the UN of condemning the Israeli settlements. America was literally the lone voice to say, or I think Israel as well, but outside of Israel, America was like the lone voice to say, we're not condemning them. And because we're part of the Big Five, right, on the Security Council, there was no official condemning. So
I guess the one thing I have to say about Guantanamo Bay is it seems to me the military can do a lot of secret things, whether they're doing it in Guantanamo Bay or they're doing it aboard a military vessel, or, I mean, I guess, I don't know. I mean, I guess it's a big red dot that tells us there were 800 people there. Now that it's 40, those 40 people could be in Leavenworth. We wouldn't know. In my 2 cents. By the way, I knew a guy.
I don't know. I think there's a paper trail. I mean, I really work briefly in prison systems. There's a really hefty paper trail on everything, and so to make sure that because there's also a lot of international lawyers and Amnesty International lawyers that are watching every single move the United States government makes in these cases with the transparency
but
laws.
It's not
they
a black
can
hole.
watch.
Just because it's on Cuba doesn't mean it's a black hole. There's still paperwork.
It is a black hole. It is
there.
a black hole in practice. It gets to be a black hole in practice. That's why.
An expensive one. It's an expensive one.
No, I'm sure it's expensive.
Right. I mean, I think that alone should be like, if let's just.
I guess I'm calling it futile. I guess I don't see the point of it because I think the military can do lots of things in secret. I mean, I understand what we're saying about American soil, but we've been in Afghanistan for 20 years. We don't have to hold people on American soil. Do we hold prisoners when we're in Afghanistan? I assume we do. At times, do we not detain people in Afghanistan? I'm sure we do.
I mean, I think part of it is if there's a prison in Afghanistan, then it's up for attack, right? Like that prison could be attacked. But sure. I mean, I think we're all coming to the conclusion, unless I'm wrong, that we should close Guantanamo Bay. I think we're all kind of going.
I would definitely need a more compelling argument than we need some black site to torture people. That doesn't seem like a very good argument at all. If there's some argument of these are terrorists and we can't bring them into the United States because then they're afforded all.
That is the critical Federalist argument. Is
it's more or less
bring these guys into Leavenworth because then they have the prisoner rights over here and all that stuff.
Probably just access to attorneys. We don't want to give them access to attorneys. Probably. Yeah.
I guess while we're talking about Guantanamo Bay in South America, I think one of the things I wanted to bring up was under the Trump administration, there was an American corporation backed a coup that happened in Bolivia. So I think, as a lot of us might know, during the 20th century, America helped back plenty of coups. And I think Guatemala was actually essentially a colony at one point. It was the colony of an American corporation. Yeah. So, I mean, we're continuing to see this, and under the Trump administration, that happened in Bolivia. In Bolivia, you had a socialist president, Evo Morales, who came to power, and during his reign, I mean, I'm biased, right? I'm not a socialist, but I believe in lefty politics. But under Evo Morales' reign, you saw a reduction in you saw a 40% reduction in poverty, a 60% reduction in extreme poverty, and Evo Morales was the first indigenous president that the country ever had. So you have him in power, then you have a coup that happens that ends up putting a far-right extremist, Bolivia's Trump, if you will, in power. But the beautiful thing is, a year later, the people of Bolivia were able to get elections, kick her out, and democratically put back in the Socialist Party, which is what they wanted, the left party. So they were able to do that. And what they did to the right-winger was they put her in jail. They did what America couldn't do, right? Tony Blinken has come out saying what Bolivia did to the right-winger is inhumane, that America demands they release the right-winger.
Wow.
Yeah. And that has gone completely under the radar.
I guess that needs some more details of what the right-winger was.
Let's take a look at that. Let's take a look at that in one of our next shows.
I'd want to research what she was charged with that's
because I'm absolutely willing to take a look at Blinken and whatever decisions he makes, because that's part of what we have to do international politics wise. We had 4 years where our international political system was just a giveaway to whoever gave, personal friendship bracelets to Donald Trump. That was sort of the way our politics was decided upon, was his stroking his ego. And now we really do need to watch what Biden does, because Biden does come from a very corporate stance within the progressive Democratic Party structure, whatever you want to call it, centrist. And those decisions don't all get made by goodwill. So especially when it comes to Central and South America.
I mean, we have to remember, even though he said he regrets it, who voted for the Iraq War, right?
Yep.
That matters. And oftentimes, I think Democrats would tout Biden's 47-year history, which has objectively great things in his 47-year history. But that's a long history, and it has a lot of dark things as well, right?
Oh, sure.
Yeah. So in that history, that happens to include voting for the Iraq War.
It's an interesting way he's got to begin his foreign policy too, because in many ways he's running around trying to just do damage control, like, 2 to 3 month damage control here of just being like, okay, here's all the things that got broken in the last 4 years, and let's try to get back together. I mean, part of him, it is a benefit that they know Joe Biden, that a lot of world leaders know him. That cuts through some of the relationship building that would have to be going on. But that's why you really got to watch the policies that go into place right away, because if they know each other, then they don't have to spend more than 10 minutes saying, okay, we're back in square. Now let's get to work. And then you got to watch what the work they do.
While we really are talking about Joe Biden right now, let's cycle all the way back to Afghanistan.
Yeah.
That's major, right? I mean, if he follows through, he's going to be the president that got us out of the Afghan war.
Yep.
I would like to, by the way, just real quickly, since we've thrown Biden under the Afghan war, the Afghan war vote, the Senate passed it 98 to 0. 98 to 0.
I was talking about the Iraq war.
Oh, well, the Afghan war passed 98 to 0 in the Senate, and the House was 420 to 1 with 10 not voting.
That one being Barbara Lee,
okay.
Oakland's representative. So, but yeah, I mean, the Afghan war, I don't think it's fair to attack any. It depends. Do you think the first few years of the Afghan war was justified?
Yes. We couldn't get over there fast enough because we didn't know. So we knew who Osama bin Laden was because of the first World Trade Center bombing and the boat, the ship that he tried to bomb in Africa. But we didn't understand what we were facing with Al Qaeda or the Taliban. It took us a lot of time to figure that out. And
I think there's two different. With the Afghan war, the problem was we didn't get out when we should have, and with the Iraq war, it was going in the first place. So I think those are two different problems.
The Senate was 77 to 23 for the Iraq war. 77 to 23, and it looks like the nays were split politically. There were Republican nays, there were Democrat nays.
Well, I think what's interesting too is we didn't have a reason to get out. Mm-hmm. There was never a right reason to get out, and so it just kept getting longer and longer. Well, it's like, well, the only thing. So Obama, in the first 4 years, he couldn't do it because he had a lot of other things going on, and in the second 4 years, what's he going to do? That's legacy stuff. Oh, so I'm the guy that gets us out, and then we have another bombing. They're going to blame Obama. I think Trump had the same thing, and I think that's why it's really interesting that Biden is using his first 100 days to get this done so that it's politically off his back. Because he can actually say Trump was going to do it too. I mean, they could share the blame if something goes really bad by us leaving, which is always the fear of the leaving.
I think Biden needs to fully lean into it. Don't give Trump say this was me, because there's no real evidence saying that there would be another major attack. Also, if you look at the truth behind 9/11, we knew about 9/11. It's just because of the rocky transition and because our agencies were not talking to each other, it happened. So I think this is I think the last polling that I saw was like only 20% of Americans support being in Afghanistan. That number might have gone up a little bit, might have gone down a little bit, but the American people overwhelmingly do not want us to be in Afghanistan. They voted for Obama because he said so. They voted for Trump because he said so. This is just a popular position, and I think Biden should lean into it and say, I'm the guy who ended the forever war.
Iraq was in the House was 296 to 133 for, and that was almost all Republicans, 215 to 6, and Republicans were for it. Democrats were split almost in half, 81 to 126. So the Democrats were slightly more nays than yays. And then in the Senate, the Democrats were basically split 29 to 21 for. So, I mean, the only reason I bring that up, it's easy to come now and say the Iraq War is very unpopular. The Afghan War is very unpopular, but you have to. The Congress is supposed to represent the people, and the common opinion at the time was that these things were necessary, that we needed to go to war to fight over there instead of fight over here and all these other things. Now, obviously, within a year, people were already saying, what's our exit strategy? What are we going to do? This seems like a mess. But I don't know. I guess to go back now and say Democrat X or Y voted for the Iraq War, I don't know.
Well, I think it's saying this person was right and this person was wrong. It's as simple as that.
It gets a little tough though too. You got to remember, let's if we're really going to go back there, you've got false representative information that they had mobile chemical weapon factories. There were, we'd have to go back, God, I totally just forgot his name. The Iraqi president was doing all kinds of crazy crap.
Saddam Hussein. Yeah.
Saddam Hussein was like executing members of his Congress. I mean, there was a lot of things going on that were very, very bad. Now, yes, in retrospect, well, I guess even as bad as it is, and even as much as we may regret it in the big picture, I guess we'd really have to spend some time to go over what was accomplished. We did get rid of Saddam Hussein. We did kill bin Laden. I don't know. Should we have done it at all? Should we have had a better strategy to get in and out? Should we have done it all with intelligence and special forces instead of a full ground invasion? I mean, we could probably go on and on and on, but it went on too long. I'm glad it's ending. We can all agree on that, but I really think I'm not sure it's fair to say person X or person Y voted for it, and because it was wrong in the long run, they were wrong.
I don't think it's fair to have this conversation without being reminded that Donald Rumsfeld and Dick Cheney sat in that office and decided that we were going to war before there was any PR around it. And who was the other one? It was Rumsfeld and Cheney, and there was the third guy who was the DNR. I'll think of him in a second. Wolfowitz. Those guys decided we were going to war, and George W. Bush sat there like a kid in his JV class and went along with it. So we cannot play this game. And then you had the John Boehners and the Newt Gingriches and the others who played the game and sounded the call. And then we went years into this thing, into the time between Afghanistan into the 2003 when we finally go to war in Iraq. And we have Colin Powell forcing the lie. I mean, they knew what they were doing the whole time. And we now know full well with documentation that they knew what they were doing.
Well, Colin Powell has all but apologized. I mean, Colin Powell has said, I was given bad information and I fed it to the American people. If I'm not mistaken, he's made a pretty clear statement that he regrets backing the act.
We didn't know what are they called? The devices that blow up by the side of the road. IEDs.
Yeah, IEDs.
That wasn't part of our vernacular back then. We didn't know what those were. We didn't have these kinds of we didn't have that kind of warfare happening 20 years ago. We chose this fight, and we've stayed in it for 20 years, and we've lived with it. It's just, as we go through this conversation tonight, I appreciate everybody being part of this because we don't do foreign policy very often. We've been fighting with ourselves about Trump and figuring out who we are, in the midst of sedition and other bullshit, which is also foreign policy. I look at January 6th, as a foreign invasion utilizing the bodies of a bunch of, it was like the invasion of the body snatchers. Now that we know that this Russian campaign has been going on with Trump since before he was elected, this is psyops. Ali Alexander used to say that all the time. He's like, I'm playing psyops. He named it. He laughed about it. He scoffed about it. He'd have 2,300 people tweeting about it. So it is foreign policy.
And you can't just not do foreign policy. You'll hear the arguments, why don't we just not invade other countries? it sounds good, and it should be a goal. Going back to goals versus
Well-
what actually happens.
Well,
But
I would say
but
you
they're
can
always-
just decide not to.
Well, it didn't work in World War II. It didn't work in World War One.
Right.
You know, there's times where you have to step in and say, "This is starting to go the wrong way. We're going."
Well,
to
and
have to
America
go."
First is a literal reaction in the same vein of nationalism and isolationism. That is a reaction by some people that are just like, I can't handle my own life, let alone knowing what's going on in Israel. Like, it's just, I can't do it. And they just don't.
I mean, being more hands off, being more defensive, Zach. Yes, I get that, but we do always have to be aware that there are times where it's better to put 1,000 troops in some country to help control a country that's out of control than to just let the out of control country take over its neighbors. I mean, we've seen that model before. So there has to be, you have to have, I think, both things. You can diplomacy, stand back. Obviously, I think it's a complete abject failure when you send armed men into another country to shoot other countries' armed men on a battlefield. Probably none of those men having any idea what the actual geopolitics behind the battle is about. We know that all these battles have major, large geopolitical goals behind them that aren't usually the human rights and other stories were sold. They're all economic or theological, the Red Scare, things like that were freaking pointless. Being scared of communism was pointless. And it cost us a lot of people over several wars. But there are times where you legitimately have to say, wait a second, this guy's getting too big for his britches. This guy's starting to attack his neighbors. In Iraq, for example, part of that was Iraq is basically drilling diagonally and sucking oil out from underneath Kuwait. That's an international crime that Kuwait can't solve by itself. So there's always going to be scenarios and times when you do have to step in and referee a little bit before things get out of control. But I think what we've definitely learned in Afghanistan and Iraq is that's definitely not the part of the world you really want to get involved in. And I'm not sure we really solved a whole lot except for replacing one regime with another.
Yeah, I mean, I guess where I'm coming from, there's too many examples of the U.S. doing regime change and it failing drastically. Also, when it comes to like intermediation, the UN has a peacekeeping force, and I really think we need to take a step back and consider: should America be the one who has to mediate the world, or should America be helping the UN mediate the world?
Well, and we don't talk about it a lot, but I believe both the Czech Civil War and the Yugoslavian Civil War, that's what we did, right? Was we assisted the UN peacekeeping forces. We weren't making strategic decisions. We were troops in the hands of the UN.
That was that weak Bill Clinton, Jeff.
Yeah, that weak Bill Clinton. That's right.
We
have done that. We have done it that way before, and I would tend to agree with you. Supporting NATO forces or UN forces is a much better way to be at war than actively taking point. When those organizations say we're not going to go there, because I believe the UN and NATO said they were not going to go to Iraq. I believe they voted and said no, and we said, well, we're going anyway. That's what I recall. I might be wrong. And now we did get some allies to help us. You know, Canada helped us, I think, in both places. Many of our allied countries helped us in both places. Obviously, the Kurds helped us in both places. So anyway, I will say not fighting is not a defense strategy. There are times where you are going to have to go be the aggressor in order to keep situations from getting out of control. I believe that is true. Now, regime change is a whole separate issue. When you get to regime change, maybe that's when we all have to check up and say, wait a second, do we really need to go into North Korea and take out that leader and then control another country? Or is there a diplomatic solution that lets North Korea fix itself and we can stay on this side of the ocean?
Final question of the night. We're going to go. We're long in the tooth. Last one, and then we're going to keep it under 3 minutes. Canada. What do they think of us these days?
Canada's sort of our dweeby little brother, right? You know, Canada can have all kinds of opinions all at once, but it knows very well who butters their bread, who sends them all their entertainment, television, everything, cars. I mean, you know, Canada.
Yeah, but since COVID, I think Canada has developed a bit more of a chip on their shoulder towards saying, you know what, clown show, you can stay down there.
I think they have an enviable position.
Look what's happening now, though. Look what's happening now in Canada.
They're having a mix of all those new variants, or what?
Canada now has a higher positivity rate than America does.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
Haha, we win.
So there you go. Then stay on your side.
Suck it,
now.
Canada. Suck it. I mean, Canada really, I mean, you know, they're fortunate. What is it? Like 85% of the Canadian population lives within 15 miles of the United States.
Yeah.
You get the Golden Horseshoe is like, it's like 60% of all Canadians. I think the Ontario area is like 60%. So the truth is Canada really is America. Let's be frank. Now, they were lucky enough to have a border and they could close it and do their things. They're lucky enough to have socialized healthcare. They're unlucky that they have just horrible weather. So there's good things about Canada. There's bad things about Canada. I think they'd look at us as dummies like they probably always have. But, you know, they couldn't have exactly solved World War II without us, could they? So, you know, I think we're like the over macho big brother strutting around the world, and Canada's kind of like right behind us, kind of like this guy, you know, but they're still right behind us
The whole time. Yeah.
the whole time.
And you know, when you think about it, when Biden announced that he was canceling the XL pipeline, certain areas in Canada freaked out. So
Yep.
it's not like Canada is, you know, a place of total moral superiority. They're doing a lot of bad things to the environment, and they're doing a lot of bad things to Native Americans, or what Canadians call First Nations peoples.
Mhm.
So Canada needs to take a step back for a second.
Alberta, Canada specifically is what they're saying is going to be the seat of right-wing violence for the next 50 years on our continent.
Huh.
Because of the amount of billionaires that are happening in rural areas it's like Hatfield and McCoy's with families that are self-financed billionaires because of the oil fields up there.
And I don't have it right in front of me.
interesting to read about.
You guys realized, of course, that the Keystone pipeline, it was actually a Keystone bypass. There's already a pipeline to do what they were doing. They just wanted to cut the corner. They wanted a new pipeline to move those oil. They have capability to move it. They just wanted to move more. In other words, this wasn't a new idea. Let's do a pipeline to move these down. They have a pipeline to do it, but it goes over to like Minnesota and straight south, and they wanted to come through the northern Midwest to cut off the corner, make it shorter, I'm sure increase volume. But the point is, like, we didn't tell them, no, you can't do that. I mean, they're still doing it. They're just not moving as much or whatever.
And you know, this is something I said in the very beginning, but when we're talking about carbon policy and environmental policy, it's a whole lot more. It's foreign policy as well, right?
Yeah.
We're talking about foreign policy in the Middle East. We're talking about how we're dealing with the Canadians and these pipelines that cross our borders. We're talking about a whole lot of different things. So we're talking about companies leaving to go to different regulated areas. So it's all interconnected. It all plays a part into each other.
If you want to have a lot of fun with Canadian diplomacy, by the way, I highly recommend the movie Canadian Bacon. If you've never seen it, it is absolutely hilarious. An American president's approval ratings crap, so he decides to attack Canada.
Okay.
And it's hilarious. The main actors reverse. John Candy plays an American who was actually born in Canada. Dan Aykroyd, who was born in Canada, plays an American, if I recall correctly. There's just 1,000 funny jokes about Canadians and Americans. But yeah, I mean, the truth is we're brothers, obviously. Canadian, and truthfully, we need to get smarter and start thinking of Mexico as our brother also. I mean, you know, we're not – it's just sort of ridiculous to act like we're standalone on North America. I mean, there's all Central American countries too.
Ted Cruz is ahead of you.
There's 30 North American countries, something like that, if you include the Caribbean. I mean, in other words, we always think it's just America, Mexico, Canada. There's actually a bunch of other countries in North America. Anyway, I think we need to start thinking of all those countries as our siblings more than our adversaries. You know, why can't we help? Maybe we could help Mexico deal with all these refugees from other countries. You know, maybe Mexico could help be the land of opportunity for these people. You know,
yeah.
I mean, wouldn't that be great for everybody? Help Mexico's economy somehow, and so. I don't know. We got to start thinking bigger, I think.
I think tonight might be a show that we refer back to several times because it's our first run on foreign policy for a while, and certainly the most in-depth that we've done on this show.
Yeah.
Since Biden has been elected.
Expert, that is for sure.
No, but it's been good to kind of go around.
To everyone for traipsing through Israel. I said I wasn't going to do it, and I tried to summarize it, and I probably should not have. It's a can of worms inside a can of worms inside a can of worms.
You know, this is why it can sometimes be good to just be on a certain side of things and just follow it through, right?
Right, that's true. Just be like, here's how it is, and then not look at the comments.
Well, I think that's our current. By the way, I think that's the current policy towards Israel. I think for the most part, everyone's just like, just hold your nose and support it. Just go. Like, don't trust us. Don't go back in there. Yeah. We just got that put back to sleep.
Don't
Do
ask
not-
that question.
Do not go back in there.
So anyway, well, thanks everybody for being part of it. We will see you on Thursday night. It's good to be here, and it'll be on the replay. Please continue to like and share, and then as we watch what's going on with Periscope, maybe we'll be back on Periscope next time.
Yeah.
Elena watched us on Periscope tonight, so we'll see what Twitter Live is doing, and we're also on our
I had it open the whole time in Periscope.
on our YouTube
also.
tonight, and I was able to put that on the link, actually the YouTube link for America Heals show over there. So please subscribe on our YouTube page as well. And thanks everybody for being here tonight. Peace. Have a great night.